You saved up, booked the charter, stepped onto the boat, and immediately became the problem. Here are 71 complaints that prove it. 1. You paid good money, so somewhere in your mind a guarantee was issued. A contractual arrangement between your credit card and the Atlantic Ocean that fish would appear on schedule in quantity at a convenient location near the boat. That arrangement does not exist, it has never existed. Fish are wild animals operating in a three-dimensional ocean governed by water temperature, barometric pressure, tidal movement, bait fish migration, and a complete indifference to your booking confirmation. Your captain uses expensive sonar, decades of local knowledge, sea surface temperature charts, and real-time reports from other captains on the water. And still sometimes comes up empty. The most decorated tournament captains in the world, professionals with full sponsor budgets and years of competition experience, blank on the water regularly. The 2023 Bassmaster Elite Series saw multiple professional anglers catch exactly 0 fish on competition days, and those people fish for a living. Commercial fishermen whose entire income depends on finding fish run unprofitable days despite using the most sophisticated technology the industry has available. The ocean covers 361 million square kilometers. The fish are not required to be where you pay to look for them. Every charter contract signed in the United States contains language explicitly disclaiming any catch guarantee, and you signed it, probably without reading it because nobody reads it, because everyone assumes the fish are included. They are not included. The captain is not a fish vending machine with a steering wheel and a GPS locked onto their living room. He is a professional navigator, a guide, and a working mariner doing the best any human being can do against a wild system that doesn't negotiate. Blaming a captain for not finding fish is like blaming a safari guide because the lions decided to nap somewhere else that afternoon. The wildlife didn't get the booking confirmation. 2. You handed over several $100s and therefore fish are contractually obligated to appear. No fish equals fraud, and you want a refund, a redo, and possibly a formal apology from the ocean itself for its unprofessional behavior. No legitimate fishing charter on Earth guarantees a catch, and any operation that claims otherwise is either lying directly to your face or is about to hand you fish from a private bait tank and call it sport. The American Sport Fishing Association explicitly notes that charters sell access to a fishing experience, not a guaranteed harvest, a distinction that is both legally grounded and biologically unavoidable. Guaranteed catch operations that do exist typically run on private ponds stocked to unnatural densities, which is the fishing equivalent of shooting fish in a barrel, and that phrase is not a metaphor people invented for fun. State fishing regulations in most jurisdictions prohibit using pre-caught fish to satisfy charter customers, meaning a real guarantee would require actual law-breaking on someone's part. Every charter contract you signed, the one you didn't read on the dock, contains language that disclaims exactly this expectation in plain English. Fishing has been practiced by human beings for over 40,000 years. In that entire unbroken stretch of human history, spanning every culture on every continent with access to water, no one has successfully made fish mandatory, not once. Professional fishing tournaments with hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake regularly produce zeros. Days where elite anglers with every preparation advantage, every technological tool, and every professional motivation in the world fail to catch fish on paid competition days. You went out for half a day in a light shop. The fish were not consulted. Demanding a guaranteed fish from a charter captain is like booking a hunting guide and demanding the deer show up on time. The deer is not on your schedule. It never was. 3. The boat rocked. Your stomach staged a full internal rebellion. And somewhere between the inlet and the first fishing spot, you decided the captain is responsible for both the size of his vessel and the personal behavior of the Atlantic Ocean in moderate seas. Seasickness is a physiological response to motion that has nothing to do with the captain, the quality of the boat, or the professionalism of the charter company. The ocean moves, boats move with it. This is not a design flaw in the vessel. This is physics. Seasickness is caused by a sensory conflict between your inner ear's vestibular system and your eyes. Your brain receives contradictory signals about movement and interprets the mismatch as poisoning, triggering nausea as a biological defense response. It affects approximately 25% of the general population on open water, according to data compiled by the United States Navy's research into motion sickness among active sailors, people whose job it is to be on boats. Boat size does affect the degree of motion, and larger vessels move less in swells, but charter operators list their vessel specifications publicly and customers choose the booking. Over-the-counter medications like meclizine and scopolamine patches have a well-documented prevention record when taken before boarding, not after you're already pale and gripping the gunwale. Wind direction and sea state are forecast 24 to 72 hours in advance. Charter captains communicate sea conditions before departure. Customers routinely ignore these communications entirely and board anyway. The United States Coast Guard requires all charter vessels to meet safety standards for their passenger capacity. The phrase, "too small" in a Karen complaint almost never reflects an actual safety violation. It reflects a personal comfort preference about a category of boat that the customer selected and booked themselves without reading the specifications. Getting on a boat, getting seasick, and filing a complaint is like riding a roller coaster, throwing up in the parking lot, and demanding to speak to the manager about the G-forces. 4. You booked a shared charter and arrived expecting a private ocean. Instead, there were other humans on the boat, actual living people who also paid money and also wanted to fish. And their existence ruined everything, and someone should be held responsible for this catastrophic miscommunication between you and the concept of shared. You booked a shared charter. It says shared in the name. The other passengers are not a surprise addition. They are the entire business model you financially participated in when you selected the cheaper option on the booking page. The charter fishing industry divides broadly into two categories: private charters, where you buy the whole boat, and party boats or head boats, where you buy a single seat alongside strangers. These categories are listed, described in plain language, and priced differently on every legitimate booking platform in existence. Head boat operations, shared fishing charters, have existed in the United States since the late 1800s, with documented commercial operations off the coasts of New Jersey and Florida dating to the post-Civil War recreational fishing boom. The Coast Guard certificate of inspection for each vessel specifies exactly how many passengers are permitted aboard. Complaining that there were too many people on a compliant vessel means you are complaining about a legal passenger count. You were offered the option to buy out entirely and declined. Private charter buyouts exist specifically for customers who want exclusivity. The price differential between a shared and private charter typically ranges from 3 to 6 times the shared rate. That price differential is what the market charges for solitude, and you chose not to pay it. TripAdvisor reviews for fishing charters regularly surface one-star complaints citing too many strangers from customers who demonstrably booked shared trips. Booking a shared charter and complaining about other passengers is like buying a bus ticket and demanding the driver remove everyone else from the bus because you needed some personal space on your commute. 5. You went on a saltwater fishing charter in July in the tropics on a boat in the middle of open water with essentially zero structural shade, and the sun was hot. This is apparently the charter company's failure, and you have documented it accordingly in a review that will live on the internet forever as evidence of what happened when you went outside. The sun has been hot for approximately 4.5 billion years. It was hot yesterday. It was hot the morning your booking confirmation arrived in your inbox. The charter company did not install the sun, and they have no mechanism to adjust its output for the duration of your trip. Open water amplifies ultraviolet radiation exposure significantly because water reflects UV rays back upward at you, and the absence of shade structures on most center console and flats boats is an inherent feature of the vessel type, not a hidden design defect that slipped past quality control. The UV index is a publicly available daily forecast produced by the National Weather Service and the EPA specifically to help people anticipate exactly this kind of exposure before outdoor activities. Charter industry surveys consistently show that sun protection items, sunscreen, hats, long-sleeve shirts, buff gaiters, are among the most commonly listed recommended items in pre-trip communication emails that customers admit they did not open or read. The fishing charter business in the Florida Keys, one of the highest intensity ultraviolet environments in the continental United States, has operated continuously since the early 1900s. In that entire century of operation, shade on a flat skiff has not been added, and the sun has not been relocated. Complaining that the sun was too hot on a saltwater fishing boat is the adult version of being surprised the swimming pool is wet. You went outside, on water, in summer. The sun was always going to be there. 6. At some point during the trip, the captain, as he had seen surrounded by tangled lines, a screaming reel, a missed fish, and a passenger who just dropped the rod into the cockpit, said a word you didn't like, and now the entire experience is ruined and a review is being composed in your head before the boat even docks. Commercial fishing is one of the most physically demanding, high-stress, and statistically dangerous occupations in the United States. The Bureau of Labor Statistics consistently ranks it among the top 3 most deadly jobs in America, with a fatality rate that exceeds the national average for all occupations by over 40 times. The cognitive and physical stress load on a working captain managing passengers, equipment, navigation, and weather simultaneously is not equivalent to managing a retail counter on a slow Tuesday. Charter captains handle unpredictable equipment failures, live bait, heavy tackle, inexperienced passengers standing near open water, and constantly shifting conditions all at the same time for 8 to 12 consecutive hours. The language used in high-tension working environments across industries, military, emergency services, offshore oil platforms, commercial construction, reflects that pressure universally, and maritime culture has historically operated with a blunt verbal code that predates the existence of HR departments by several centuries. This is extensively documented in maritime literature going back to the Age of Sail, and nobody reading it is particularly surprised. Studies on occupational stress find that brief profanity outbursts in high-stakes physical work environments function as cognitive pressure releases and in some cases actually improve task performance. The complaint the captain swore appears in charter reviews alongside catch photos showing large, beautiful fish, confirming the profanity occurred during successful, exciting fishing moments rather than hostile confrontations. No United States maritime regulation prohibits profanity on a commercial charter vessel. Complaining that a fishing captain swore is like complaining that a rodeo smells like horses. You're in the environment. The environment is authentic. That was always going to be true. 7. You wanted snapper. The captain put you on grouper, mahi, and amberjack all day. Species that other anglers pay specifically to target. Fish that are genuinely difficult to catch and genuinely excellent to eat. But it wasn't snapper, and therefore the charter was a failure, requiring some form of acknowledgement and possibly compensation for the fish that had the audacity not to show up. Fish species selection is not a menu. The ocean is not a restaurant. You're not placing an order with a kitchen. Target species availability on any given day is governed by seasonal migration patterns, water temperature, current structure, bait availability, moon phase, and daily feeding activity, none of which are within the captain's control or subject to modification based on customer preference. Federal fishing regulations enforced by NOAA and state wildlife agencies impose seasonal closures and bag limits on specific species. Red snapper in the Gulf of Mexico has operated under some of the most restrictive federal management in United States history. At various points limited to as few as 9 open recreational days per year for private vessels. Tournament fishing operations that spend millions of dollars and years of preparation specifically targeting blue marlin, sailfish, or other prestige species routinely report entire tournament events where the target species simply does not cooperate despite every conceivable advantage. Responsible charter captains communicate realistic expectations about what species are currently active in their region before departure. Most customers do not process or retain this information. The phrase, "I wanted a different fish," is among the most frequently documented zero-help complaints in captain forums online, including detailed discussions on major sport fishing community platforms where captains exchange real accounts of what gets filed. Complaining that you caught the wrong fish on a charter is like going to a buffet, filling your plate completely, eating it, and demanding a refund because they were out of the one dish you had in mind. You still ate. The ocean still delivered. 8. You went on a boat A fishing boat, a commercial fishing charter vessel that goes out every single day to catch fish, returns every single day with fish, and does this on repeat for the entirety of its operational existence. And it smelled like fish. And also like the marine fuel that powers the engine keeping you alive offshore. This was deeply unacceptable and has been documented in a review. A fishing boat smelling like fish and fuel is not a hygiene failure. It is confirmation that you are standing on the correct vessel and that it has been doing its job. Marine diesel and gasoline fuel have distinctive odors that are inherent to internal combustion engines operating in enclosed or semi-enclosed bilge environments. This is basic chemistry, not negligence. The smell of fish on a working charter comes from bait, cut mullet, sardines, squid, shrimp, used to attract the target species. The bait is the mechanism that catches fish. Removing the smell would require removing the mechanism. Many offshore charter vessels use live bait wells, fish boxes, and live well systems that by their nature retain biological material and associated odor. These are standard required components of a productive fishing vessel, not oversights in the cleaning schedule. The sensitivity to boat odors is actually exacerbated by the same vestibular disruption that causes seasickness. The olfactory system processes smells differently when the inner ear is under motion stress, making odors feel more intense. Charter boat captains clean their vessels after every single trip using pressure washing, bilge treatment, and bait well flushing. The smell returns with the next day's bait because it is a fishing boat that goes fishing every day. Luxury yacht charters smell like cleaning products and salt air. They cost 4 to 10 times more per day. The smell differential is priced into that difference. Being bothered that a fishing boat smells like fish is like visiting a bakery and filing a complaint about the bread smell. 9. Someone else on the shared charter got to reel in more fish than you. The captain facilitated this injustice by managing rod assignments based on proximity, readiness, and timing, rather than by conducting a continuous equity audit of each passenger's cumulative rod time. And now the entire experience was unfair and possibly discriminatory. On party boats and shared charters, the standard industry protocol is first angler to the rod or nearest angler gets the fish. A system designed for operational efficiency on moving water, not for social fairness management among strangers who simultaneously want the same rod at the same time. Fish strikes happen in seconds. A captain managing 6 passengers, live bait, navigation, sonar, and a trolling spread cannot pause to survey the group's feelings about equitable distribution when a line goes off. The window between strike and lost fish is not long enough for a democratic vote. Children and first-time anglers are frequently prioritized on family charters. Captains do this openly, it is communicated at the start of the trip, and the majority of adults aboard actively support it in the moment, then forget that they supported it when the day ends. The time of fish spent on the line after the strike is finite. An amberjack or a big mahi does not wait while a rotation is sorted out. Captain forums document cases of passengers physically pushing each other toward rods during strikes, behavior driven by exactly the rod time entitlement and mindset, creating genuine safety hazards on moving vessels near open water. The complaint about rod time appears almost exclusively in reviews from customers who booked the cheapest available shared option. Private charter reviews almost never reference it, because on a private charter, the rod is always yours. Complaining about rod time on a shared charter is like joining a recreational soccer league and demanding the coach guarantee that you take every single penalty kick. You joined a team, teams share. 10. You noticed the captain glancing at his phone multiple times throughout the trip, and you interpreted this as distraction, personal indifference, and proof that he wasn't fully committed to your fishing experience, possibly scrolling social media while your line sat in the water unattended. A charter captain's phone is a multifunction navigation, weather, communication, and fishing intelligence tool. What you interpreted as casual scrolling was almost certainly him actively running the boat and making the decisions that determined where you fished and whether you caught anything. Modern charter captains use smartphone applications for real-time weather radar. Apps like Windy and Pocket Weather Marine provide hyperlocal sea state updates that update faster than traditional forecasts, as well as sea surface temperature maps, tide tables, and current tracking that change throughout the day. VHF radio is the primary maritime communication tool, but it is supplemented on most modern charters by cell-based communication with other local captains in real time, sharing information about bait balls, fish activity, and hazard conditions in the specific area you are fishing. Navionics and similar marine navigation applications run on tablets and smartphones and display live sonar data, GPS tracking, and waypoint management. Tasks the captain is required to monitor continuously, not just at departure. The Coast Guard does not prohibit captain cell phone use at the helm for navigation or vessel management purposes. The operator of a commercial vessel is required to maintain situational awareness. He is not required to perform attentiveness for the visual reassurance of passengers. The captain on phone complaint is so common in charter forums that captains have shared specific accounts of it. And in a significant percentage of documented cases, the phone use occurred while the captain was communicating with another vessel about current fish location. The complaint disappears from reviews where the trip was productive. Complaining that your captain touched his phone is like complaining your pilot keeps touching the instrument panel. That panel is the job. 11. Lines crossed somewhere during the trip, a tangle happened, time was spent clearing it, and the captain, who was apparently supposed to achieve supernatural command over monofilament in an open ocean with active current, wind, wave action, and multiple people casting simultaneously, has failed in his professional duty and will be rated accordingly. Line tangles on shared charters are as inevitable as turbulence on commercial flights. They are not malpractice. They are physics applied to string inside a dynamic, constantly moving system that no amount of professional management fully eliminates. Monofilament and braided fishing line interact with wind, current, boat movement, and the independent actions of 6 simultaneous casters to produce crossing opportunities at a rate that exceeds any human's ability to prevent entirely. This is geometry, not negligence. Professional tournament fishing, conducted with experienced crews, high-end matched gear, and fully coordinated casting protocols, still produces tangles. The difference is that experienced anglers clear them without writing a review about it afterward. The physics of tangling are straightforward. Multiple lines in moving water experience lateral current drag, and any variation in retrieve speed, angle, or boat position creates crossing potential. On a vessel with multiple anglers operating simultaneously, the geometry of complete tangle avoidance is not solvable with human reflexes alone. Charter captains actively manage trolling spreads using outriggers, planer boards, and specific rod placement to minimize crossings. This is standard professional practice, not an optional upgrade. Braid to monofilament tangles are particularly difficult to clear quickly because the two materials respond differently under tension. Most charters run identical line systems specifically to reduce this complication. Tangles caused by passenger error, casting over another line, failing to reel in when told, dropping a rod mid-fight, are the most common source of serious tangles and are documented extensively in captain training materials. Blaming the captain for a tangle is like blaming the highway department because your earbuds knotted in your jacket pocket. 12. The captain ran the boat at cruising speed to reach a productive fishing location before the tide changed and conditions closed the window, and the ride in moderate chop at 30 knots was uncomfortable, and you feel this speed was reckless and potentially dangerous, and the captain was not considering your physical well-being when he made the operational decision to run his boat to the fish. A Coast Guard licensed captain operating within the posted vessel speed ratings for his specific vessel and legal sea conditions is not being reckless. He is managing a schedule against weather, tide, and fish activity windows that close on their own timeline, whether you are comfortable during the run or not. Every Coast Guard inspected charter vessel has a certificate of inspection specifying operational parameters within which the captain operates. Offshore fishing locations, canyons, ledges, temperature breaks, offshore reefs and wrecks, are often 20 to 60 miles from the dock. Every additional 10 minutes of transit at reduced speed is 10 fewer minutes of actual fishing. Fishing windows are governed by tidal movements and fish feeding cycles. Arriving late to a tide change because a passenger was uncomfortable at cruising speed is a real productivity loss that affects every person aboard. The ride on a center console vessel at speed and light chop is objectively rougher than a calm inshore trip. This is inherent to the vessel type and the sea state, both of which are observable before departure from the dock. Coast Guard licensing for charter captains requires demonstrated competency in vessel operation, including appropriate speed judgment for prevailing conditions. A licensed captain running at speed in safe conditions is exercising a professional judgment call backed by documented training and verified sea time. The too fast complaint appears almost exclusively in reviews where the trip produced a lot of fish, suggesting the run was uncomfortable and the fishing was excellent, and discomfort became the grievance when the fish made the day a success. Telling a licensed captain he drove too fast is like telling a commercial airline pilot his cruising altitude seemed unnecessarily high. 13. The vessel lacked a sufficient enclosure, canopy, or covered cabin structure to allow you to fish in complete comfort without sun exposure, and this architectural inadequacy of the fishing platform is clearly the charter company's oversight and should be corrected before your next visit. Most productive saltwater fishing platforms, flat skiffs, center consoles, Carolina-rigged sport fishing boats, are open boats by deliberate design. The openness is a feature of the platform. It is what allows every angler on board to cast in any direction at any time without a roof obstructing the rod or a wall cutting off the angle. A cabin or full canopy limits casting lanes, reduces the functional fishing surface, and creates the exact blind spots that cost you the fish you came to catch. The only charter vessels with meaningful full shade coverage are large party fishing head boats and enclosed sport fishing yachts, both of which cost dramatically more to charter per person and still catch fish at comparable rates to more agile open platforms. T-top structures, the raced stainless steel frameworks found on most modern center consoles, provide partial shade directly over the helm console. Shade at the bow and stern fishing positions is inherently limited by the design that makes those positions functional fishing stations. UV protective clothing, neck gaiters, and wide brim hats were invented specifically for this situation. They are portable shade, they weigh almost nothing and pack into a bag you were already bringing. The fishing charter industry in the Florida Keys has run open boats over shallow sun-blasted flats in full tropical exposure since the 1920s, when pioneering guides built the skiff-based bone fishing industry that still operates today. In a century of operation, nobody added a roof to a flat skiff because the fish wouldn't cooperate with a roof in the way. Complaining about shade on an open fishing boat is like complaining there's no ceiling at a baseball stadium. 14. After a successful day on the water, you expected the captain to clean, fillet, vacuum seal, and individually bag every fish you caught at no additional charge as a natural extension of the service you already paid for, and when a small additional fee was mentioned, you were shocked, visibly offended, and determined to mention it prominently in your review. Fish cleaning and filleting is skilled manual labor, and it has always been a separate service from the charter itself. The fish are yours. The labor required to professionally process them is not automatically bundled into the trip fee, any more than the car wash is bundled into the price of the gas. Fish cleaning on charter boats is performed by mates, crew members whose compensation on many vessels is primarily tip and gratuity based or billed as a separate add-on service. This is standard industry structure disclosed in booking materials. Commercial fish processing at even small scale requires sharp tools, specialized equipment including cutting boards and fish boxes, and significant physical labor. A skilled mate producing professional fillets from a box of mahi or snapper is delivering work that retails for $20 to $30 per pound at a fish market. The time required to fillet a full box of catch can exceed an hour of dedicated physical labor, and on vessels with large catches and multiple customers, that extends to several hours of post-trip work. Many charter operations employ a dedicated mate specifically for fish cleaning, and that mate's income on many headboats comes primarily from fish cleaning tips rather than a base hourly wage, which is a compensation structure directly parallel to the restaurant tipping model most people already understand. Some all-inclusive charter operations do include basic cleaning in the trip fee and advertise this explicitly. Their existence does not make cleaning a universal standard. Expecting free filleting is like paying for dinner at a restaurant and expecting someone to come home with you afterward and do the dishes. 15. At some point during the trip, you didn't know something. How the reel worked, when to set the hook, what a specific piece of terminal tackle was for, and you are holding the captain responsible for this information gap because he did not deliver a comprehensive, fully retained pre-departure orientation seminar covering every possible question you might have during an 8-hour fishing trip on the open ocean. Every charter captain gives a safety and fishing briefing before departure, every single one. If you retained none of it, that is a listening problem on one specific end of the dock, and it is not the end with the captain. Coast Guard regulations require all commercially operating charter vessels to conduct a safety briefing covering life jacket locations, emergency procedures, and vessel layout before departure. This is not optional. Captains who skip it risk their federal license. Fishing instruction on charters is additionally provided reactively. Captains and mates show passengers how to use equipment when the fish are actually present, and the instruction is immediately applicable, because hands-on teaching at the moment of use is demonstrably more effective than abstract pre-departure lectures about gear the passenger has never touched. The pre-departure window on most charters is 5 to 10 minutes, during which the captain is simultaneously managing departure from the dock, monitoring radio traffic, reviewing the navigation plan, and confirming gear readiness. A comprehensive fishing tutorial during this window is operationally impossible, while all of those other things are also happening. Experienced fishing guides consistently report that pre-trip instruction is the least retained information of the entire charter experience. Passengers are excited, distracted, and taking photographs of the boat while the briefing happens. The instruction lands when the rod bends. Most charter booking platforms include instructional FAQs, technique videos, and downloadable preparation guides available before the trip. Blaming the captain for your knowledge gaps is like attending a cooking class, not paying attention, burning your dish, and blaming the chef for the quality of instruction. 16. You expected the charter vessel, a working commercial fishing boat optimized for finding and catching fish, to also function as a catering operation with a curated snack selection meeting your personal standards, and when the onboard provisions fell short of this expectation, the trip was fundamentally diminished, and you want that noted. Most fishing charters provide water and ice. Some provide basic snacks. None are required to run a kitchen, and every legitimate charter in the country tells you to bring your own food before departure. The standard charter industry approach is water is provided, ice is provided, and passengers are explicitly instructed to bring adequate food and drinks for the trip duration. This is communicated in booking confirmations and on virtually every charter company website that has ever existed. A working fishing charter vessel prioritizes the fishing platform, sonar, tackle, bait systems, rods, reels, safety equipment. Galley facilities on most center consoles and offshore sport fishing boats are minimal by deliberate design because galley weight and galley space directly compete with fishing functionality. Full-day offshore charters run 8 to 12 hours. Every pre-trip communication addresses the need to bring adequate food and hydration for the full duration. This is not concealed information. Catered private sport fishing yachts with full galleys, crew-prepared meals, and stocked bars operate in the luxury charter market at price points starting around $2,000 to $5,000 per day. That price differential exists because catering is a fundamentally different operational capability that requires dedicated infrastructure and crew. Seasickness, which affects a meaningful percentage of first-time offshore passengers, is worsened by heavy food before or during a rough trip. The industry standard recommendation to keep food light and simple is a health recommendation, not a service gap. Captains report that the food complaint most consistently comes from passengers who did not bring provisions despite being told to, ate the shared snacks the captain provided, and still filed the review. Complaining about food on a fishing charter is like going camping and complaining there was no room service. 17. The charter departed at 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and you are on vacation, and you did not expect the ocean to have its own operating schedule or for a professional maritime business to have structured its departure time around factors other than your comfort preferences on a leisure trip. Fish feed at dawn. Tide windows are set by lunar gravity. Offshore runs consume daylight that doesn't come back. Early departures are not a captain's personal preference or a subtle form of punishment. They are a biological and logistical requirement built around the specific conditions that make fishing productive rather than pointless. Dawn and dusk feeding activity, the golden hours universally recognized across saltwater fishing, are driven by light penetration changes in the water column that trigger bait fish movement and predatory fish feeding responses. This is documented marine biology, not folklore. Many offshore fishing destinations require 1.5 to 3 hours of running time just to reach productive grounds. A 6 o'clock departure to fish a canyon 60 miles offshore means the first line enters the water at approximately 8:30, already past the peak of early morning activity. Tidal flow determines when fish are actively feeding over reefs, wrecks, and nearshore structure, and it operates on a fixed schedule based on the lunar calendar. Captains build departure times around peak tide windows because arriving after a tide has turned means arriving at dead water. Summer heat in southern markets builds throughout the day. Early departure captures cooler air temperatures for the run and avoids midday heat that reduces fish activity and passenger endurance. Afternoon charters exist in many markets and produce fish less consistently and are priced to reflect that. The early departure premium exists because early departures work better. Complaining that your fishing charter left too early is like complaining that a Black Friday sale starts too early. The timing isn't designed for your convenience, it's designed for the result, and if you want the result, you show up when the thing actually happens. 18. At some point during the trip, the captain spoke firmly to your children, possibly telling them to stop running on the deck, step back from the gunwale, put down the tackle they were reaching into, or sit down during the run. And this directness felt unkind, and you have documented it as a failure of customer service by a man who was simultaneously trying to keep your child from going overboard at sea. A charter captain is legally responsible for the safety of every single person aboard his vessel. Keeping your child away from open water, moving machinery, sharp terminal tackle, and unprotected deck edges is not a personality flaw. It is his federal license and his personal conscience operating simultaneously in the same direction. The Coast Guard holds the operator of a for-hire vessel personally responsible for passenger safety outcomes. A child who falls overboard from a charter boat generates a Coast Guard incident report, a potential criminal negligence investigation, and a license review that can end a captain's career and livelihood. Moving charter vessels travel at speeds between 20 and 45 knots on offshore runs. A child standing on the bow or leaning over the gunwale at those speeds is an immediate life safety risk that requires firm, immediate instruction, not a gentle conversation calibrated for emotional comfort. Fishing tackle, particularly treble hooks on lures and circle hooks on bottom rigs, causes serious puncture injuries to experienced adult anglers with regularity. The risk to an unsupervised child reaching into an open tackle box is not theoretical or unlikely. Charter captains who have had children go overboard in non-fatal incidents report years of psychological impact and extended Coast Guard scrutiny. Their directness with children on deck is not a character defect. It is operational policy built on real stakes. Reviews citing captain unkindness to children almost universally describe safety instructions. Don't lean over, sit down during the run, don't touch that. Not personal hostility or cruelty. Calling a captain mean for telling your child to step back from the edge of the open ocean is like calling a lifeguard rude for telling your kid to walk at the pool. 19. You concluded from the captain's honest navigation of multiple locations that he must not know his home waters. Despite the fact that he holds a federal license, has fished this specific body of water for years, and was doing the exact thing that top-performing charter captains across every saltwater market do on every productive trip. Searching for fish by running multiple spots is not evidence of incompetence. It is the literal professional methodology used by the best captains in the business, and standing still in unproductive water is the actual failure mode. NOAA research on fish spatial behavior confirms that even in heavily frequented fishing areas, aggregation points shift daily based on bait movement, current changes, and prey location. There is no fixed address for fish. There never has been. The Coast Guard OUPV and Master License exams test local knowledge, navigation, safety, and seamanship, all verified through written examination and documented time on the water in the specific region. A licensed local captain, by federal definition, knows the area. Top-ranked charter captains on the tournament circuits, individuals with documented public catch records and professional reputations built over decades, run multiple spots on many competition days because mobility is a strategy and persistence is a strategy. And sitting still because a passenger thinks you should is not a strategy that has ever produced fish. The captain doesn't know the area complaint in online reviews is almost universally correlated with slow fishing days where multiple experienced captains across the same region also reported poor conditions. Demonstrating the problem was environmental, not navigational. Local knowledge in fishing is built through years of daily operation on a specific body of water. Most charter captains fishing a region have more cumulative hours on that water than any passenger will accumulate in a lifetime of recreational fishing. Accusing a licensed captain of not knowing his home waters because the fish moved is like accusing a local forecaster of not knowing your town because it rained on your picnic. 20. The cut bait on the charter smelled strongly, didn't look pristine coming out of the cooler, and you interpreted this as evidence that the captain cut corners on bait, quality rather than understanding even the most basic principle of how fishing bait is supposed to work. Cut bait is supposed to smell. The smell is the entire point. The smell is the mechanism. You are standing there offended by successful fish catching technology doing its job in real time. Fish locate food primarily through chemoreception, detecting chemical signals dissolved in the surrounding water. Oily, strong-smelling bait like cut mullet, menhaden, and mackerel releases amino acids and fish oils into the water column that travel hundreds of yards in current and trigger-feeding responses in target species at distances your eyes could never see. The most productive bottom fishing baits in the world, used by professional commercial fishermen from the Gulf of Mexico to the North Atlantic, are specifically chosen for their high oil content and strong odor dispersion. Fresh, odorless bait is measurably less effective, not more respectable, not cleaner performing, just worse at catching fish. Charter captains who source live or fresh-cut bait are still working with animals that have been out of the water for hours by the time the vessel reaches the fishing grounds. The progression of decomposition in bait is actively managed, not eliminated, because some decomposition is operationally desirable. Certain highly effective baits, salted squid, aged mullet, fermented chum material, are intentionally cured or partially decomposed to maximize odor release. This is a documented fishing technique, not a refrigeration failure. Captain forums contain documented accounts of customers who complained loudly about bait smell during the trip and then caught the most fish of anyone on the boat because their olfactory discomfort was directly proportional to the bait's effectiveness. Complaining that fishing bait smells is like complaining that coffee smells too strong while it's brewing. The smell means it's working. 21, at some point during the charter, you decided it would be fun, reasonable, or your right as a paying customer to operate the vessel, or you were disappointed that this option was never offered, as though the Captain's Coast Guard licensed commercial fishing boat is a bumper car at a summer carnival, and the wheel is available to whoever paid the entry fee. A Coast Guard licensed charter vessel is not a recreational experience where the captain passes the helm to paying customers at the appropriate moment. It is a federally regulated commercial maritime vessel. Operating a for-hire passenger vessel under United States maritime law requires a Coast Guard Merchant Mariner credential, specifically a master or operator of uninspected passenger vessel license, obtained through documented sea time, written examination, physical evaluation, and federal background check. You do not receive one by completing a charter booking. If a licensed captain allows an unlicensed passenger to operate a for-hire commercial vessel, he risks immediate license suspension or permanent revocation. The licensing authority takes unauthorized vessel operation with extreme seriousness because the consequences of incompetent vessel operation with passengers aboard are catastrophic and irreversible. Commercial fishing boats travel at significant speeds through waters with other vessels, channel markers, crab pot lines, submerged hazards, and navigation structure. The docking procedure alone, backing into a slip against wind and current, takes years of practice to execute reliably. Marine insurance for charter vessels covers the named, licensed operator specifically. Allowing a passenger at the helm creates an immediate insurance coverage gap for any incident that occurs during that unauthorized transfer of control. Passengers on commercial airlines do not fly the plane. Passengers in licensed taxis do not drive the cab. Passengers on charter fishing boats do not captain the vessel. You bought passage from someone who earned the credentials to provide it. These are permanently different purchases, and they do not convert into each other. 22. The Coast Guard approved personal flotation devices aboard the vessel were orange or bulky or visually inconsistent with your vacation aesthetic. And this was filed as a service deficiency that reflects poorly on the charter operation and the captain's overall attention to the passenger experience. Life jackets are approved on one criterion: keeping you alive when you enter the water without intending to. They are not evaluated by design publications. Their color scheme is not their function, and their function is not your comfort. Coast Guard. Type 2 and Type Personal flotation device requirements for commercial vessels prioritize buoyancy ratings, reflective material for search and rescue visibility, whistle attachment points, and federal approval stamps. Comfort and appearance are not in the regulatory framework because the device exists for emergencies, not for extended voluntary wear during recreational activities. The orange color of commercial-grade flotation devices serves a documented functional purpose: high visibility for rescue operations in ocean conditions where a person in the water is a small object in a very large space. Making them more fashionable would reduce their detectability. Inflatable personal flotation device technology, which produces slimmer and less physically imposing options, exists and is used on some vessels. These devices require regular hydrostatic testing, scheduled inspection, and rearming kit replacement, operational costs that smaller charter operations manage against the durability and simplicity of standard foam devices. The discomfort of wearing a personal flotation device is completely irrelevant to its function. In an overboard situation in offshore water, you are wearing it while you wait for rescue. Uncomfortable stops being the relevant variable approximately 15 seconds after hitting the water. Coast Guard data consistently identifies the absence of a worn flotation device as the primary factor in recreational boating drowning fatalities. Complaining that the life jacket is ugly is like complaining the hospital defibrillator clashes with the room decor. When it becomes relevant, you will not care what color it is. 23. The weather turned rougher than expected during the trip, or was windier or choppier than you had hoped, and you believe the charter company should have either prevented this meteorological development or known with certainty several days in advance that your specific trip day would produce perfect conditions and communicated that guarantee at the time of booking. The captain checked the weather. He checks it every single day with the obsessive regularity of someone whose vessel, license, and passengers' physical safety depend on the accuracy of that assessment. National Weather Service marine forecasts carry an explicit confidence interval that degrades with forecast range. 24-hour marine forecasts are significantly more reliable than 72-hour forecasts, and even 24-hour forecasts carry documented error rates, particularly for afternoon sea state development driven by sea breeze and convective activity that builds over warm water during summer months. Sea state on any given day is the compound result of wind speed, wind duration, fetch, swell period, and tidal interaction. A multivariable system that produces emergent behavior routinely underestimated by single variable regional forecasts. Local conditions can diverge dramatically from area forecasts because geographic features focus wave energy in ways the regional model doesn't capture at fine scale. Charter captains who cancel trips due to weather absorb a complete income loss for that day with no compensation. The financial incentive is always to run the trip. When a captain cancels, he has determined the risk calculation clearly favors passenger safety over his own revenue. The most conservative decision he can make. Weather-based cancellations happen regularly despite the direct financial cost to the operator. When a captain does run in conditions that turn rough, he has determined sea state is within safe operating parameters for his vessel, his passengers, and his license. The complaint about rough seas almost never involves a Coast Guard incident or a safety system failure because the captain made the call correctly and brought everyone home. Asking a captain to guarantee good weather is like asking your driver to guarantee no traffic. He can check the forecast, he cannot move the clouds. 24, the captain communicated with you throughout the trip, explaining techniques, narrating what was happening with the tide and the bait, pointing out wildlife and conditions, and you interpreted this ongoing educational engagement as a distraction from the fishing itself, as though guiding you through the experience is somehow separate from the experience you paid to have. Charter captains who talk during fishing are doing their job. The talking is part of the job. The highest rated fishing charters on every major booking platform, TripAdvisor, Fishing Booker, Google Reviews, consistently cite captain knowledge sharing and direct communication as primary factors in 5-star reviews. The industry's own customer satisfaction data says talking works across every market and every vessel type. Fishing instruction is a core service component of a guided experience, categorically distinct from unguided rental fishing where you take a boat out alone. If you wanted to fish in complete silence without instruction or narration, you could rent a boat. Explaining what is happening on the water, tide changes, bait movement, reading the sonar, identifying species, understanding why the captain made a specific positioning decision, is how customers understand the experience they're having rather than standing on the deck as confused spectators. Wildlife narration, pointing out dolphin pods, sea turtles, bird activity over bait fish schools, flying fish breaking the surface, is documented in positive charter reviews as some of the most memorable content of the entire trip. The talking does not slow the fishing. A captain can communicate with another vessel on the radio, explain a knot, describe structure showing on the sonar display, and watch every rod simultaneously. These are not competing activities requiring sequential attention. The talked too much complaint in reviews correlates almost perfectly with slow fishing days where the conversation was the most eventful thing that happened, and the reviewer is unconsciously attributing the quiet fishing to the full narration. Complaining that a fishing guide talked too much is like complaining a museum docent explained the art too thoroughly. You hired a guide. Guiding includes words. 25. Between fish, the mate was not in continuous visible motion, performing an uninterrupted sequence of observable service tasks, and you interpreted this stillness as laziness, professional indifference, or a customer service failure on a working fishing boat rather than understanding what a charter mate's job actually looks like between hookups. A charter mate's work compresses into short, high-intensity windows when fish are hooked, and expands into focused observation and active preparation between those windows. The same operational model used by emergency responders between calls, surgical teams between procedures, and every other profession where the work is event-driven rather than continuous. The mate is watching every line for subtle movement that precedes a strike. He is monitoring bait presentation, scanning the water for bird activity and surface disturbance, managing the cockpit, and maintaining readiness for the next hookup. None of this is visible from the passenger seating area when nothing is actively happening. Mates on offshore charters are responsible for bait preparation and replacement, clearing tangled lines, gaffing or netting fish at the rail, removing hooks from landed catch, managing the fish box, operating the outriggers, and assisting the captain with navigation watch when required. These responsibilities are all present simultaneously, even when only one is visibly occurring at any moment. The physical labor of gaffing a large fish, a big mahi, an amberjack, a grouper being pulled off structure, requires explosive coordinated strength and practiced timing. A mate who appears relaxed between fish is conserving the physical capacity to execute that work reliably when the moment demands it. Mate positions on party fishing headboats are among the most physically demanding roles in any segment of the service industry. Hours of heavy labor followed by fish cleaning that extends well beyond the trip itself. The mate stood around complaint vanishes entirely from reviews where multiple fish were caught because the mate's activity during those hookups is unmistakably visible and unambiguous. Complaining the mate stood around between fish is like complaining the firefighter just sat in the truck between calls. 26. The trip felt frightening. The water was rough, the boat moved with the swells, the open ocean looked enormous and uncontrolled, and you were uncomfortable. And you interpreted these conditions, which are the standard physical reality of offshore boating, as evidence of a safety deficiency in the charter operation rather than evidence that you were in an unfamiliar environment. Discomfort and danger are not the same thing. A federally licensed, Coast Guard inspected charter vessel operated by a licensed captain within legal sea state parameters is not an unsafe environment. It is an unfamiliar one, and those are fundamentally different categories with completely different appropriate responses. The Coast Guard inspection regime for for-hire commercial vessels includes hull integrity checks, fire suppression systems, communication equipment verification, life-saving equipment inventory, and operational documentation review. A vessel with a valid certificate of inspection has passed all of these categories to federal standard. The phrase "felt unsafe" in charter reviews almost never cites a specific safety equipment failure or a regulatory violation, because passengers who experience actual safety failures file Coast Guard incident reports, not online reviews. The human nervous system has not evolutionarily adapted to offshore ocean environments, making open water inherently uncomfortable for first-time passengers, regardless of the actual measurable risk. The feeling of unsafety reflects evolutionary programming responding to novelty, not an objective operational risk assessment. Coast Guard data shows that the vast majority of boating fatalities involve unregistered recreational vessels, alcohol consumption, and absent personal flotation devices, none of which are characteristics of a licensed, inspected charter operation with a professional crew. The specific sensation of a vessel in chop, the sounds, the motion, the physical exposure to wind and spray, is more viscerally intense than sitting in a car, and humans respond to visceral sensation as threat regardless of the actual risk level present. Saying you felt unsafe on a Coast Guard inspected fishing charter is like saying you felt unsafe in a licensed taxi because the highway was faster than your neighborhood street. 27. You fish recreationally with some regularity, and you felt the captain was too instructional or too involved in directing your technique during the trip, as though his professional attention to your methods was an implied insult to your ability rather than standard professional guidance extended to every person who steps aboard his vessel. The captain doesn't know your actual skill level until he watches you fish. Every charter begins with the same unknown variable. How competent is this particular passenger? And the answer across the industry, documented in every captain forum and fishing guide training resource, is consistently that self-assessed skill levels are unreliable and frequently optimistic in ways that cost fish and tackle. The Dunning-Kruger effect, the psychological phenomenon where people with low to moderate proficiency overestimate their competence relative to actual performance, has been specifically cited in fishing guide training literature as a dominant pattern in recreational angling. Captains and mates absorb the direct consequences of passenger overconfidence, broken gear, lost fish, tangled lines, and near injuries from mishandled tackle. Their instructional posture exists because experience has taught them that announced expertise and demonstrated expertise are different things measured separately on the water. The techniques used in charter fishing, circle hook timing, live bait management, fighting large fish on heavy conventional gear, managing line and active current, differ significantly from recreational pier fishing or freshwater lake fishing. Fishing all the time somewhere else does not automatically transfer to offshore saltwater performance. Tournament-level competitive anglers regularly accept instruction and technique feedback from local guides in unfamiliar water because they understand that regional knowledge is a distinct skill from general fishing ability. Professionals accept coaching without offense. Being offended that a fishing guide offered instruction is like being offended that a golf professional corrected your swing at their course. You are on their water. Their track record is the credential. Your weekend fishing is not the same credential. 28. At some point during the charter, the primary bait supply was depleted, and you interpret this as evidence of inadequate planning, poor preparation, or a deliberate shortchanging of your experience, rather than considering the straightforward possibility that you use the bait because the fishing was exceptionally active. Bait consumption on a charter trip is driven by fish activity, the technique required to reach them, and the biological attrition of live bait in the well, all of which are completely unknown at the dock when the coolers are loaded that morning. Bait consumption rates vary enormously based on how aggressively the fish are feeding. A day with heavy bottom action burns through cut bait at 3 to 5 times the rate of a slow day with minimal action. There is no formula that predicts this before departure, because the fish activity level is itself the variable being discovered during the trip. Live bait, pilchards, threadfin herring, live pogies. Experiences natural attrition in live well systems throughout the day from oxygen depletion, temperature stress, and physical crowding. Maintaining a full live bait supply across an 8-hour offshore trip is not a fixed quantity problem with a known solution. Charter captains load bait based on historical averages for their specific trip type and target species. An unusually active fishing day can consume a full day bait load during a half-day window. This is the desirable version of the bait problem. It means the fishing was exceptional. Many experienced captains carry secondary bait options, artificial jigs, lures, cut frozen bait, specifically as contingency when primary bait is depleted, and transitioning to alternatives is a normal operational procedure on productive days. Captain forums document cases where customers complained about running out of bait in logs showing double-digit catches for the trip. The bait depletion was caused by successful fishing. Complaining that a charter ran out of bait is like complaining a popular restaurant ran out of its special because everyone ordered it. 29. The captain communicated certainty about the plan, expressed confidence in his approach, predicted a productive day based on current conditions, and because the fishing wasn't uniformly exceptional, you concluded that his professional confidence was actually arrogance or dishonesty, and as though a captain who expresses doubt at the dock is more trustworthy than one who believes in what he's doing. Captain confidence is a professional posture built on accumulated experience and genuine knowledge of the water. It is not a contractual guarantee disguised as enthusiasm. Leadership psychology research identifies positive framing and confident communication as key factors in guided experience satisfaction across outdoor recreation industries, fishing guides, wilderness guides, sporting coaches. Captains who project uncertainty produce anxious, disengaged passengers who evaluate every slow moment as confirmation of failure. Captains who project task confidence produce engaged, patient passengers who give the fishing room to develop. Performance psychology specifically distinguishes between task confidence, belief in one's process and preparation, which the captain can legitimately hold, and outcome confidence, which requires controlling the fish, which nobody can do. Top-performing tournament captains are almost universally described as confident in profiles of elite fishing guides across every major saltwater market. Their confidence comes from an accumulation of correct decisions made over years of professional operation, not from certainty about any individual day. The moment a captain says he doesn't think today is going to be great while still at the dock, your experience is already negatively framed before the first line is wet. A documented principle in guided experience industries where expectation setting before the activity significantly shapes perception of the actual activity. Confidence complaints and reviews correlate strongly with fishing outcomes. The same captain described as appropriately confident on productive days is described as arrogant on slow ones. His behavior didn't change. The fish changed. Calling a confident captain arrogant because the fishing was slow is like calling a confident surgeon arrogant because recovery took longer than expected. 30. You inspected the rods, reels, or terminal tackle provided by the charter and concluded they were substandard, either because they weren't the consumer brand you use personally or because they showed the visible wear of professional daily use. And this aesthetic assessment became a grievance in their review of a trip that may have caught fish with those exact scuffed-up tools. Charter fishing tackle is selected for durability under a heavy commercial use, not for appearance on a showroom shelf. A scuffed Shimano reel with 10,000 hours of offshore use is not cheap tackle. It is proven tackle that has survived conditions your recreational gear has never encountered. Charter fishing rods and reels experience exponentially higher use cycles than recreational gear. A rod deployed 300 days a year accumulates years of recreational wear within months of operation. External cosmetic wear is a feature of high-use professional equipment, not evidence of inferior construction. Most established charter operations run mid to upper-grade commercial specification tackle, Shimano, Penn, Daiwa, specifically because durability and reliability under heavy use justify the operational investment. These brands run $150 to $400 per reel at retail, and the charter is using them every single day. Consumer-grade tackle that looks pristine on the shelf is often less appropriate for charter fishing than heavier, more robust, conventional gear designed for specific fish sizes, structure types, and line classes. The tackle on a legitimate charter is matched to the fishery, not to showroom presentation. Terminal tackle, hooks, sinkers, swivels, fluorocarbon leaders, is consumable material replaced regularly and purchased in bulk. Its cost per unit has no useful relationship to fishing effectiveness for standard applications. The cheap tackle complaint in reviews almost never cites actual gear failure or specific mechanical deficiency. It cites appearance, worn finish, older blanks, unfamiliar labels, which has no relationship to performance in the water. Complaining about used-looking charter tackle is like complaining a fire truck has scratches. It has scratches because it was used. Being used was the whole point. 31. You are fishing an area you personally like the feel of. Things seemed promising based on nothing in particular, and the captain made the professional decision to move to a different location. And you believe he abandoned a productive spot prematurely based on your intuition, as opposed to the sonar data, water temperature readings, and current analysis he was actually using to make the call. The captain moved because he was reading information you don't have access to and wouldn't know how to interpret if you did. Modern sport fishing captains run live sonar technology that displays a real-time fish presence, depth, and feeding activity level beneath the vessel. A captain watching fish vanish off the sonar display in real time is making a data-driven decision, not an arbitrary one. Fish feeding windows are time-limited by tidal movement, light penetration changes, and bait availability cycles. Fishing a structure after the feeding window closes produces nothing, regardless of how much you like the spot or how long you've already invested in it. The concept of resting a spot, leaving a location and returning after a period to allow disturbed fish to resettle, is a documented fishing strategy used by professional guides worldwide. A captain who moves from a productive-seeming location may be planning a return after working other spots in the area. Tournament fishing data consistently shows that captains who move locations multiple times per day Outperform captains who commit to single locations because mobility is a measurable competitive advantage across every saltwater market. The psychological bias operating in this complaint is the sunk cost fallacy. Your emotional investment of hope and expectation in a specific piece of water makes leaving feel like a personal loss, even when staying is the objectively less productive choice. Telling a captain to stay on a dead spot because you like it is like telling a surgeon to keep making the same incision because you drove a long way for the operation. He has the information, he's making the call. 32. You booked a full day offshore charter, 8, 10, or 12 hours on the water, and somewhere in the middle of it, you ran out of enthusiasm, decided you were tired, and expected the captain to turn the vessel around and return to the dock early because your personal energy levels have superseded the trip duration that every other passenger on the vessel also paid for and is still expecting to receive. The trip duration is in the booking. You paid for a full day. The captain is delivering the full day you purchased. The fact that you personally exhausted your recreational stamina before the ocean ran out of fish is not a service deficiency on his end. Full-day offshore fishing charters are an 8 to 12-hour physical and environmental experience involving sustained sun exposure, motion, concentration, and physical activity in conditions that differ substantially from anything on land. This is accurately described on every charter listing before you book. The duration is not a concealed variable. On shared charters, the decision to return early based on one passenger's fatigue directly penalizes every other passenger who paid for and is expecting the complete trip. The captain is placed in an impossible situation by one person's comfort expectation colliding with 6 other people's paid experience. Captain forums document the specific conflict this creates. An angler catching fish actively objecting to an early return demanded by a passenger who is done, and captains who accommodate the early return for one receive worse aggregate reviews than captains who complete the trip. The same passenger who wants to leave at noon due to fatigue often also files the review citing insufficient fishing time. The fishing time was the complete contracted day, the fatigue shortened it. Booking a full day offshore charter and wanting to leave at noon because you're tired is like buying a concert ticket and asking for a partial refund at intermission because your feet hurt. The concert keeps playing, you bought the whole show. 33 federal regulations, conservation science, and active fisheries management required the use of circle hooks on the trip, and you preferred J hooks because that is what you have always used. And you don't see why a paying customer should be compelled to change their preferred technique, especially since you are the one holding the rod, and the fish are theoretically for you anyway. Circle hooks are federally mandated on many offshore charter fisheries, and the regulation does not include an exemption for customers who find them inconvenient. NOAA National Marine Fisheries Service regulations require the use of non-offset non-stainless steel circle hooks when fishing with natural bait for billfish, swordfish, and many managed reef species in federal waters. Violation is a federal offense that generates fines for the vessel operator and potentially for the individual angler. Scientific research published in peer-reviewed fisheries management journals shows that circle hooks reduce gut hooking rates in released fish by 60 to 90% compared to J hooks, a finding that directly supports population sustainability for the species, generating the charter industry's entire revenue base. Circle hook technique differs meaningfully from J hook technique. The rod sweep hook set that recreational anglers use with J hooks causes missed fish with circle hooks, which require a steady reel pressure and allow the hook to self-set in the corner of the jaw. This is a genuine learning curve that takes one trip to navigate. Captains who allow passengers to use prohibited tackle in federal waters risk federal criminal prosecution, NOAA enforcement investigation, and permanent loss of their commercial fishing license endorsement. The captain enforcing the hook regulation is protecting his career, his vessel, and the fish population that his customers will want to catch next season and the season after. Refusing to use circle hooks on a federal waters charter because you prefer J hooks is like refusing to wear a seatbelt in a rental car because you find it restrictive. The regulation exists whether you prefer it or not. 34, you caught a fish that measured slightly under the legal minimum size limit for that species. You wanted to keep it because it was your only fish of the day. The captain required you to release it into the water, and you are now composing a review about how this interaction constitutes a failure of customer service on a working charter boat operating in federal waters. keeping undersized fish is a federal or state criminal offense. The captain who made you release it prevented both of you from receiving a citation, a significant fine, and the potential for vessel confiscation proceedings. He protected you from a legal consequence you were actively attempting to create for yourself, and you are reviewing him poorly for it. Recreational fishing size limits for each species are established by NOAA fisheries and state agencies through stock assessment processes that determine the minimum size at which a fish has statistically had the opportunity to reproduce at least once. Keeping fish below this threshold directly depletes population recruitment for future seasons. Penalties for keeping undersized fish in federal waters can include fines up to $100,000 per violation in egregious cases, along with vessel seizure authority under the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act. Charter captain licenses include a for-hire endorsement that is suspended or revoked upon citation for allowing illegal retention of undersized fish. NOAA enforcement officers conduct both at-sea and dockside inspections of charter vessels, including fish box checks. The customer wanted to keep it is not a recognized legal defense in any enforcement proceeding. The undersized fish you released alive has a high probability of surviving, growing into legal size, and producing eggs that sustain the population you will want to fish next year. Getting angry at a captain for enforcing a size limit is like getting angry at a pharmacist for requiring a valid prescription. He is not your obstacle. He is the thing standing between you and the federal enforcement system. 35. You caught fish during the charter. You wanted extensive and high-quality photographic documentation of every hookup and every landed fish for your personal use and social media accounts. The captain was simultaneously operating the boat and managing the fishing, and the resulting photo record of your trip was judged insufficient to meet your documentation standards. A charter captain's primary function is finding, hooking, and landing fish. Photography is a courtesy extended with whatever operational capacity remains after the actual fishing is managed at professional standard. His priority list does not terminate with your content calendar. The captain of a working fishing charter is simultaneously managing vessel navigation, sonar monitoring, bait management, line watching, weather assessment, and radio communication. Tasks that require continuous attention and both hands at various moments. Photography requires a free hand, a steady position, and a momentary break from those primary responsibilities that does not always exist when the fish is at the boat. Mates on charters with dedicated crew often photograph between bouts of tackle management and fish handling, but the mate is also gaffing fish, clearing lines, replacing bait, and processing catch. Photography is not the mate's primary professional function. The most cited photography complaint involves fish held briefly for a photo, while the captain or mate is focused on hook removal from an active fish or managing another rod with a strike in progress. Fish welfare, minimizing time out of water for released fish, and crew safety take precedence over compositional quality in the moment. GoPro cameras and action cameras mounted on rods or vessels exist specifically to capture fishing moments without requiring a human operator. The technology that solves this problem costs less than the charter and is available at any outdoor retailer. Complaining that your fishing captain didn't document the trip sufficiently is like complaining that your surgeon didn't film the operation cinematically enough for your family update. He was occupied with the procedure. The procedure was the entire point. 36. You arrived with a personal, ethical, or dietary objection to the use of animal products, and you expected the captain to substitute artificial lures for the standard cut bait operation of the charter without prior arrangement, prior communication, or any acknowledgement that changing the fundamental fishing methodology of the trip affects every other passenger aboard who paid for a standard bait fishing experience. Cut bait is used in charter fishing because it is demonstrably more effective than artificial lures for most bottom fishing and inshore applications across the species portfolios that most charters target. The choice is productivity-driven and grounded in decades of catch data, not arbitrary tradition. Artificial lure fishing is valid for specific species in specific contexts, pelagic trolling, surface lure applications for stripers, jigging for certain deep water species, but it is not a universal substitute that produces equivalent results across all charter fishing scenarios. Your personal dietary ethics regarding food consumption have no technical relationship to fishing bait, which does not enter your body. The fishing activity itself, pursuing, catching, and potentially retaining fish, involves the same ethical territory, regardless of what attractant is used to bring them within range. Requesting artificial lure-only fishing on a shared charter creates a direct operational conflict with the other passengers who paid for and expect standard bait fishing. The captain cannot individualize fishing methodology by passenger on a shared vessel without compromising the collective outcome for everyone else aboard. The most demanding artificial lure fishing disciplines, precision jigging, technical fly fishing, require significant technique skill that most charter passengers don't arrive with, making the switch harder, not simpler. Booking a fishing charter and then requesting no animal products be used in the fishing is like ordering a cheeseburger and requesting they hold the meat. You are still ordering a cheeseburger. Something is going to be involved in this transaction that was always going to be involved, and the kitchen cannot redesign the menu mid-service because one table has reconsidered the concept. 37 dolphins appeared alongside the vessel. You excitedly informed the captain that this was a clear signal that fish were right underneath you. And when he didn't immediately stop and drop every line on the dolphins, you assumed he was missing an obvious opportunity that your superior recreational instincts had identified before his professional ones. Dolphins following a moving boat are almost always bow riding for hydrodynamic efficiency, one of the most thoroughly documented cetacean behaviors in marine biology. And they are not a fishing GPS signal. They are having a good time at the expense of your fuel consumption and nothing more. Bow riding behavior and bottlenose in common dolphins is a documented recreational behavior in which dolphins use the pressure wave created by a vessel's bow to travel with minimal energy expenditure, identical in principle to a cyclist drafting behind a truck. The fish are irrelevant to the behavior. When dolphins are actually feeding, the behavior looks completely different. They circle a concentrated area repeatedly, dive in rapid succession, and are accompanied by surface-breaking bait fish and diving seabirds working the same zone. A feeding dolphin pod is a fishing signal. A bow-riding dolphin is a hitchhiker who found a free ride and has no information for you. Dolphin feeding activity actually disperses bait fish schools through predation pressure, often reducing the prey concentration available to larger game fish below the surface. Fishing directly under an active feeding pod is sometimes counterproductive for exactly this reason. Federal law under the Marine Mammal Protection Act prohibits approaching marine mammals within 50 yards for recreational purposes and engaging in behaviors that alter their natural movement. Experienced captains use dolphin sightings as one data point among many, not as a guaranteed short-term indicator. Seabird aggregations, particularly frigate birds and diving terns working a concentrated zone, are measurably more reliable fish location signals. Telling a captain to fish under bow-riding dolphins is like telling a chef to cook wherever pigeons are sitting. The pigeons are there because something is happening. The pigeons are not the ingredient. 38, you observed what you felt was insufficient chumming activity during the trip, concluded the captain was withholding a simple and obvious tool that would have dramatically improved your results, and wanted noted that a more generous chum deployment would have fixed the slow fishing and justified the charter fee you already paid. Chumming is a context-specific technique with a defined set of operational requirements, and it is not a universal fish summoning device that produces results regardless of conditions. Dumping chum in the wrong current, depth, or location does nothing except feed bait to the wrong species and waste a consumable resource the captain purchased before departure. Effective chumming requires a specific combination of factors: sufficient current to carry the slick toward fish rather than pooling it under the boat, the right depth so that dispersed material reaches the holding depth of the target species, and the right species profile since pelagic fish respond to surface chum while deep bottom species largely do not. Chumming in dead calm conditions with no directional current produces a concentrated mass of attractant directly beneath the hull with no dispersion pathway, attracting small bait stealers and non-target species while the intended fish remain unaware and elsewhere. Ground chum, frozen and ground menhaden or herring, is a consumable input that captains purchase and manage as a direct operational cost. Using it indiscriminately burns through supply with zero return on investment. The chumming technique that produces dramatic visible results requires active current to function, and those conditions exist intermittently rather than continuously. Captains deploy chum when conditions are favorable, not when a passenger decides it should be happening. In certain regulated fisheries, specific attractant methods are restricted in managed zones, adding another layer of captain judgment that has nothing to do with reluctance. Demanding more chum without understanding current is like demanding more seasoning without tasting the food. The seasoning was never the problem. 39, you spotted seagulls in the distance, suggested the captain alter course to investigate because birds always mean fish, and when he declined to immediately chase a distant flock of opportunistic coastal scavengers across miles of open water, you felt he was ignoring an obvious signal that your instincts had correctly identified and his professional experience had somehow missed. Not all birds mean fish, some birds mean garbage, floating debris, a dead bait fish, or a discarded sandwich from another vessel. The birds mean fish principle is selectively and specifically true under narrow conditions. Actively diving terns, frigate birds, and brown pelicans, working a concentrated zone in a sustained and repetitive pattern, are reliable surface feeding indicators that often correspond with subsurface predator activity pushing bait fish upward. Seagulls resting on the water or circling loosely are not this signal. Herring gulls and laughing gulls, the most common nearshore seagull species along every United States coast, are classified by ornithologists as generalist scavengers, whose primary food sources are human refuse, carrion, invertebrates, and any available organic material. They are not biologically oriented toward fish in ways that make them reliable fishing indicators. Experienced offshore captains read bird activity with operational specificity. Species, altitude of circling, whether they are actively diving or drifting, direction and speed of movement, and whether multiple species are simultaneously working the same area from different heights. A single variable, I see birds over there, is insufficient information for a course change that burns fuel and consumes fishing time. Running toward distant gulls that turn out to be eating a floating food container costs real time and real diesel on a vessel that meters both carefully. The most reliable multi-species bird signal involves frigate birds, which physically cannot land on water and therefore only hover above actively feeding fish. Telling a captain to follow seagulls is like telling a tracker to follow pigeons. Pigeons go everywhere. They will take you to a park bench. 40, the fish you caught were legal size, actively feeding, and delivered to you by a captain who put the boat on them. But they weren't the trophy-sized specimens you had constructed in your imagination before departure, and this gap between expectation and biological reality is apparently the captain's operational failure and worth documenting in a public review. Fish size within any population is governed by age, individual genetics, food availability, local fishing pressure, and reproductive biology, none of which are adjusted by the captain before your arrival. Fish populations in any given body of water exist in a size distribution, a bell curve of individuals determined by age class and ecological factors, with the largest fish representing the oldest and rarest individuals who are inherently the least frequently catchable on any given day. Tournament fishing, where professional anglers specifically pursue trophy-sized fish with every preparation advantage and every technological tool available, regularly produces days of only small to medium specimens despite maximum effort and expense. Trophy fish are rare by definition, and rarity is not something a charter captain manufactures or withholds. Many heavily fished nearshore and reef areas experience what fisheries managers call size truncation. Historical fishing pressure reduces large fish abundance over time, leaving populations skewed towards smaller, younger individuals. This is a documented population-level consequence of recreational and commercial harvest, not a daily captain decision. NOAA stock assessments regularly document average size reductions in targeted species as responses to historical overfishing across entire management regions. Larger fish are more behaviorally cautious, more likely to avoid high-pressure fishing areas, and require specific seasonal conditions and techniques to target effectively. The size of fish encountered on any given day is among the least controllable variables in the entire charter operation, ranking below weather, current, tide, bait, and feeding activity in terms of captain influence. Complaining that the fish were too small is like complaining the trees in the forest weren't tall enough. The size distribution was already set before you left the dock. 41. Fishing turned out to require patience, physical effort, technical skill, and a genuine tolerance for uncertainty and variable outcomes, none of which you were apparently prepared for. And the captain failed to disclose before departure that fishing is in practice fishing and has always been fishing and will continue to be fishing regardless of what you paid for it. The difficulty of fishing is implicit in the word itself. The sport has been practiced by human beings for over 40,000 years, across every culture with access to water, and in that entire unbroken span of human history, it has never once been reliably easy. No dictionary definition of fishing in any language includes the phrase guaranteed effortless success or anything approaching it. Charter fishing operations sell fishing experiences, not fish procurement services, and that distinction is legally and operationally significant. You are sold the activity. The activity has always required the things it required before you arrived. Fishing demands physical skills, rod handling, line management, hook set timing, fish fighting technique under load, that take time to develop and cannot be absorbed by simply holding money and standing near water. A first-time or occasional angler on a 4-hour charter is not going to develop these skills between the dock and the first spot, and cannot reasonably expect the activity to perform itself on their behalf. The physical demands of deep-sea fishing, specifically fighting large fish on heavy conventional tackle for sustained periods, are substantial enough that physical fitness is listed as a genuine consideration in offshore charter booking guidance. Amberjack and large grouper fights can last 20 to 40 minutes and produce genuine muscle fatigue in experienced anglers who fight fish regularly. Recreational fishing is the most popular outdoor sport in the United States, with over 50 million participants annually, which also makes it the outdoor sport most frequently attempted by people who overestimated how passive the experience would be. Complaining that fishing was harder than expected is like taking your first piano lesson and being surprised the piano doesn't play itself. 42. The boat ran a significant distance to reach the fishing grounds. You have decided this transit time was wasted and should not count toward the charter you paid for, and you would like the captain to explain why productive fishing was not available 10 minutes from the dock so that the inefficiency of the ocean's geography could have been avoided and your time better respected. Fish location is determined by habitat, the specific structure, depth, temperature, and bait conditions the target species require to exist in catchable numbers. The fish are where the habitat is. The habitat is where it is because bathymetry and oceanography placed it there over geological timescales, and the captain's influence over this arrangement is exactly 0. Offshore target species, grouper, snapper, mahi, tuna, wahoo, marlin, are associated with specific depth ranges, bottom structure, and water temperature conditions that exist at fixed geographic locations dictated by the physical environment. The Gulf of Mexico's productive grouper and snapper reefs begin in meaningful numbers at 80 to 120 feet of water, which in much of the northern Gulf places them 20 to 40 miles offshore. Atlantic Canyon fishing for tuna and billfish occurs at 60 to 100 or more miles from many mid-Atlantic ports. The distance is the geography. It does not change based on charter pricing. Fuel cost on offshore charter vessels running twin outboard or inboard diesel plants burning 20 to 50 gallons per hour makes unnecessary running directly economically irrational for the captain. Every mile beyond the productive grounds costs him money from his own operating budget. Captains don't run far because they enjoy the commute. They run far because the fish require it. Charter trip descriptions universally specify whether they are nearshore, offshore, or deep water operations because the geographic range is a fixed characteristic of the trip type that determines everything else. Complaining that the captain ran too far offshore is like complaining the ski resort is too far up the mountain. The snow is up there. That has always been where the snow is. 43. A large fish broke off during the fight, snapped the line, threw the hook, or pulled free at the boat. And you believe the captain should have done something to prevent this loss, possibly through direct physical intervention, better tackle selection, or some form of fish retention assistance that does not currently exist as a product or service in any market. A fish that gets away is a fundamental and irreducible element of fishing as an activity. The captain cannot reach into the water and hold the fish on your hook. Physics and the biology of the fish are running that portion of the operation, and neither responds to charter pricing. Hook pulls, instances where a fish physically removes itself from a hook, occur when hook placement is imperfect, hook sharpness is marginal, or the specific anatomy of the fish's jaw doesn't provide adequate purchase for the hook style in use. These are probabilistic events that occur at measurable rates even with perfect technique, sharp hooks, and ideal gear. Line breakage happens when the force applied by a fighting fish exceeds the line's rated test strength, a calculation complicated by knot efficiency, which reduces rated strength below label values, abrasion against bottom structure, and the sudden surge forces generated by a jumping fish. Captain intervention in an active fish fight, grabbing the rod, adjusting drag without being asked, is considered poor guiding practice unless the passenger requests help or a safety situation develops. The fight is the passenger's experience. Removing it removes the reason anyone came. Professional fishing tournaments where participants invest enormous resources to maximize landed fish percentages still report hookup to landing ratios well below 100% for most species categories. Even elite preparation results in lost fish because the fish is a participant in the interaction with its own agenda. The fishing expression, that's why they call it fishing and not catching, exists because fish being lost is so fundamental to the sport, the culture codified it into language. Blaming the captain when a big fish gets away is like blaming the golf course when your putt lips out. 44. You caught fish during the trip. The captain required or strongly encouraged releasing them due to regulations, species protection status, or conservation practice. And you believe the fish you caught should be yours to retain regardless of the legal framework that determines what may and may not be kept from federal waters on a licensed commercial vessel. Catch and release practices mandated by regulation are federal or state law, and those laws apply to you specifically and without exception because you are fishing in the jurisdiction where they exist. Mandatory catch and release for specific species is codified in management plans developed under the Magnuson-Stevens Act and the Endangered Species Act. Atlantic sailfish, bonefish, permit, and tarpon in Florida are among species with catch and release requirements backed by active regulation and enforcement. The science of post-release survival for properly handled fish is extensively documented. For most common sport fish released with appropriate technique and minimal air exposure, survival rates range from 85 to 98%, making release an operationally effective conservation tool rather than a symbolic gesture. The marine fisheries that support the entire charter fishing industry exist at their current population levels, partly because catch and release practices reduced harvest pressure over decades of adoption. Florida tarpon fishing, Keys bonefish fishing, and Atlantic bill fishing all owe meaningful portions of their current viability to widespread release practices. The economic value of a catch and release fishery dramatically exceeds the harvest value of the same fish calculated once. A single live tarpon caught and released generates an estimated $3,000 to $8,000 in total economic activity over its lifetime of being caught and released by successive anglers. Dead, it generates zero going forward. You have the photograph, the fish returns to the water, the photograph is permanent. The fish becomes someone else's experience next season and the season after. Complaining about catch and release is like complaining a national park won't let you take the rocks home. The rocks are why you came. They stay so the next person can come too. 45. The seas were rougher than you expected during the trip, and you believe the captain should have identified in advance that conditions would exceed your personal comfort threshold and either canceled the trip or selected a calmer day, as though marine weather forecasting produces the specific and personalized certainty your schedule required. The captain checked the forecast. He checks it every day with the kind of focus that only comes from having a federal license, an insured vessel, and a boatload of people depending on his judgment. National Weather Service. Marine forecasts carry explicit confidence intervals that degrade with forecast range, and even 24-hour forecasts carry documented error rates for afternoon sea state development, driven by sea breeze and convective dynamics over warm water. Sea state on any day is the compound output of wind speed, wind duration, fetch distance, swell period, and tidal interaction. A multivariable system that routinely produces conditions outside what single-variable regional forecasts predict at fine spatial scale. Local sea state can diverge sharply from area forecasts because geographic features like inlets, shoals, and current systems concentrate and steepen wave energy in ways regional models don't resolve at the scale of a specific charter route. Charter captains who cancel trips absorb a complete income loss for that day with no offsetting revenue. The financial pressure is always to run. When a captain cancels, he has determined the risk calculation clearly favors safety over his own paycheck. The most conservative judgment he can make. When he runs in conditions that turn rough, he has assessed sea state as within the operational parameters of his specific vessel, his passenger load, and his license obligations. The complaint about rough seas in reviews almost never involves a Coast Guard incident report or a documented safety failure because the captain made the correct call and every person on board returned to the dock. Asking a captain to guarantee calm seas is like asking your pilot to guarantee no turbulence. He can read the forecast. He cannot move the atmosphere. 46. Music was playing on the vessel during the trip, some genre you didn't choose, and this ambient audio environment that had no effect on the fish, the captain's navigation, or any operational component of the charter was apparently sufficient cause for a documented grievance about the overall quality of your fishing experience. The captain's boat is the captain's boat. The audio environment on a privately operated commercial fishing vessel is not a shared streaming service governed by a passenger preference poll conducted at the dock before departure. Charter fishing vessels are private commercial operations. The captain's right to manage the onboard atmosphere, including whatever music he plays, if any, is not subject to any passenger preference, standard, maritime regulation, or commercial services statute anywhere in the United States. Music on charter vessels is a courtesy, not a contract item, and it does not appear as a bookable service specification in standard charter agreements. The acoustic environment on an offshore charter, engine noise, wind across the console, water against the hull, reel drag running under load, creates a background noise floor that makes music selection essentially irrelevant to the fishing experience at any meaningful level. No fish has ever changed its feeding behavior in response to the genre playing on a vessel above it. The wrong music complaint appears in charter reviews as a standalone grievance with no corresponding fishing failure in the same review, confirming that the trip was operationally successful by every relevant metric, but the reviewer needed something to file. Captains report that music complaints on vessels where fishing was excellent are vanishingly rare. Not because the music changed for those trips, but because the fishing outcome dominates the entire experience assessment, and the music becomes context so irrelevant it doesn't register. No major booking platform shows any correlation between music genre on a charter and overall customer rating. Giving a captain a 1-star review because of the music is like 1-starring a hiking trail because you didn't like the wind direction. The trail did its job. You were there to hike. 47 fish from the shared charter were processed collectively at the end of the trip. You couldn't identify with certainty which specific individual fish had been in your personal possession during the day, and this communal processing approach was filed as a service deficiency on the grounds that your fish were somehow different from and superior to the identical fish caught by everyone else on the same boat in the same water. Fish from shared charters are processed collectively by species and size class, divided among passengers according to the trip's established protocol, and this is standard disclosed industry practice consistent across the entire shared charter market. Federal and state fishing regulations for shared charter operations specify individual bag limits per angler, the number of each species each person may legally retain, based on species count, not individual fish identity tracking. Regulatory compliance is species count based. There is no regulatory framework anywhere that requires individual fish identity chain of custody on a shared party vessel. The fish cleaning process on a working charter involves high volume rapid processing. A skilled mate filleting 40 or more fish in the post-trip window has no operational capacity for individual fish labeling, sorted staging, and personalized packaging. The processing model is a working production environment, not a personal chef service. Private charters, where one party buys the entire vessel, can and often do arrange for specific fish tracking and individual processing as part of the premium service structure that comes with the premium price. This capability is not a standard shared charter service, because it requires dedicated labor that the shared pricing model does not support. The fish you hooked and the fish you receive fillets from are the same species, the same legal size class, caught in the same water column on the same tide on the same trip. Their biological and culinary properties are identical. Demanding your specific individual fish be labeled on a shared charter is like demanding the exact ear of corn you picked at a farm stand be individually reserved from the same field. It's the same corn. It grows up the same. 48. The captain communicated operational requirements during the trip: where to stand, when to cast, how to handle fish at the rail, when to reel, and the accumulated set of professional instructions felt controlling, excessive, and inconsistent with your expectation of a relaxed recreational activity on the open water. Every rule the captain communicated during that trip exists because someone, somewhere, did the specific thing that rule prohibits, and the outcome was bad enough to justify a standing instruction to prevent it from happening again. Maritime safety regulations under Coast Guard authority govern passenger behavior on for-hire vessels in ways the captain is legally required to enforce. Standing on the gunwale, riding the bow at speed, and handling certain equipment categories without instruction are safety prohibitions with regulatory backing, not preference-based restrictions invented by an overly cautious captain. Casting instructions: where to cast, at what angle, in what sequence relative to other anglers, are operational requirements that prevent line tangles, rod conflicts, and gear loss on vessels with multiple simultaneous anglers. These are fishing efficiency protocols that protect every passenger's experience, including yours. Hook handling protocols: how to hold a fish, where to remove a hook, how to use a de-hooker for barbed terminal tackle, exist because treble hooks embedded in human hands are a documented and recurring charter injury category. Emergency medical response offshore is not fast. The rule prevents the injury rather than treating it 30 miles from the nearest dock. Movement restrictions while the vessel is underway are Coast Guard safety requirements that prevent passenger ejection from wave impact, wake from another vessel, or sudden course correction at speed. Captain authority over vessel operations and passenger behavior is specifically recognized under United States maritime law. The captain's word on a vessel in federal waters carries the same compliance expectation as a flight crew's instructions on a commercial aircraft. Complaining about too many rules on a fishing charter is like complaining about too many safety announcements before the flight. The announcements exist because someone didn't comply once. 49. You have calculated that the boat spent a certain number of hours in transit and a smaller number of hours with lines in the water, and you feel the running time should not count toward the charter duration you paid for. As though the logistics of reaching the product you purchased are a service to efficiency rather than the operational requirement that makes the product available in the first place. The charter price covers the entire maritime operation: vessel, captain, fuel, tackle, safety equipment, insurance, and all associated time from departure to return at the dock. The running time is not dead time appended to the real service. It is the logistics of delivering you to the specific environment where the thing you paid for can occur, and it consumes the most expensive operational resource on the boat. Fuel at $4 to $7 per gallon, burned at 20 to 50 gallons per hour, represents the largest single variable cost on most offshore charters, and the running time consumes the majority of that fuel on most deep water trips. The captain is not running for entertainment. Every mile costs him money directly. Charter contracts specify departure time and return time, not fishing time, because the total operational period is the contracted service, transit included. The fishing destination is not adjacent to the dock, and that geographic relationship is a fixed condition of the local marine environment disclosed in the trip description before you booked. Shortening running time would require moving the dock or moving the fish, and neither is within the captain's operational authority regardless of what you paid. Airlines do not refund taxi time at the gate, hotels do not refund checkout processing, surgical centers do not refund prep and recovery time. Every professional service includes preparation, execution, and completion as a continuous build experience, and none of them offer line item refunds for the portions that feel less exciting in retrospect. Demanding a refund for running time is like demanding a refund for the drive to the ski resort because you only count time on actual snow. 50. The fishing was slow. The captain acknowledged this honestly and attributed it to current conditions. A cold front, a tide change, unusual water temperature. And you would have preferred a more optimistic narrative that didn't acknowledge reality because the reality was not what you paid for, and the truth about it felt like an additional insult on top of a slow day. A captain who lies to you about why the fishing is slow is a worse captain than one who tells you the truth. You are on the water together. The conditions are physically present around both of you. Pretending otherwise does not produce fish and does not change what the sonar is showing. Cold fronts are documented fish activity suppressors across virtually every saltwater species in every managed fishery. The barometric pressure drop associated with frontal passage triggers measurable behavioral changes in fish, including reduced feeding activity, depth migration away from structure, and retreat into holding patterns that resist conventional bait presentation. This is documented in peer-reviewed fisheries science across multiple species categories in multiple geographic regions. A captain who accurately diagnoses a cold front slowdown is providing the same professional value as a physician who accurately diagnoses an unfavorable test result. The diagnosis is a service, even when the diagnosis is not good news. Customer satisfaction research in guided experience industries consistently shows that honest communication about conditions combined with visible continued effort to work around those conditions, produces higher overall satisfaction ratings than either silence or false optimism. Experienced anglers, the customers most likely to book repeat charters, specifically value honest captains over optimistic ones because experienced anglers recognize what conditions look like and know when they're being managed versus informed. The same captain is described as appropriately candid on good days and inappropriately negative on slow ones by customers who can't separate the messenger from the message. Wanting a captain to lie about bad conditions is like wanting a doctor to say you're fine when you're not because the appointment was expensive. 51. The boat was drifting with the current over structure. You felt that anchoring would have concentrated the fishing and produced better results, and the captain's decision to maintain a controlled drift was interpreted as a missed opportunity that your recreational instinct had identified and his professional experience had not. Drift fishing versus anchoring is a tactical decision made by the captain based on species behavior, current speed, bottom structure type, and bait presentation requirements. Not a coin flip, not a habit, and not something improved by passenger input from the casting deck. Drift fishing is the preferred and more productive technique for mobile pelagic species, mahi, kingfish, cobia, certain tuna, because these fish are actively moving and respond to a bait that mimics a fleeing prey item. An anchored bait sitting stationary in pelagic territory is less effective than a naturally drifting presentation by a measurable margin. Anchoring over reef or wreck structure is productive for bottom-associated territorial species, grouper, snapper, but requires current speeds slow enough for bait to sink to the bottom rather than streaming horizontally behind the vessel at an unproductive angle. In strong current, anchoring produces a bait presentation at the wrong depth and wrong trajectory for the species targeted. The act of anchoring a charter vessel in offshore depths, deploying, setting, and later retrieving a proper anchor takes 15 to 30 minutes of operational time and introduces vessel safety risk if the anchor drags or the windlass fails in adverse conditions. Modern GPS and dynamic positioning technology on flats boats allows precise position holding without anchoring entirely. Drift speed management using a sea anchor or drift sock is a sophisticated technique used by professional offshore guides to control drift rate over structure without committing to anchor deployment. A captain who anchored every time a passenger suggested it, regardless of current and species conditions, would produce fewer fish and more equipment complications than one making tactical mobility decisions from real data. Telling a captain when to anchor is like telling a surgeon whether to use stitches or staples. Both tools exist. Which one is correct depends on what's actually happening inside. 52. The rod and reel provided were heavier or stiffer than you expected. Fighting the fish was more physically demanding than anticipated, and you believe lighter and more comfortable tackle should have been the standard equipment for the specific fish you came to catch in the specific water you came to fish it in. Tackle weight on a charter is matched to the target species size, class, and fighting behavior, and using tackle too light for the fish you're targeting doesn't make fishing easier or more pleasant. It makes the fight longer, the outcome less controlled, and the mortality rate of released fish higher because extended fight time increases physiological stress. Amberjack, large grouper, and offshore tuna require heavy conventional tackle in the 50 to 80 pound class because these fish generate physical forces that lighter gear cannot safely manage without either breaking or being fought to a standstill that exhausts the fish beyond recovery. Using undersized tackle on large fish creates extended fight times that increase lactic acid buildup in the fish's muscle tissue, reducing post-release survival rates in ways documented by NOAA Fisheries Management Guidance on Sustainable Recreational Practices. Undersized tackle also produces more breakoffs, lost fish, lost terminal tackle, lost time, because the gear cannot apply sufficient controlled pressure to turn or stop a running fish at the critical moments of the fight. Heavy conventional offshore rods are physically demanding by design because the physical transfer of energy from angler to fish through the rod blank is the mechanism of the fight itself. Reducing the weight of the tool reduces the effectiveness of that energy transfer. Light tackle fishing is a legitimate and skilled discipline for specific species in specific contexts. Permit, bonefish, light tackle snapper work, and is a trip type that can be specifically booked and discussed before departure. It is not a mid-trip substitution available on demand when the standard gear feels heavy. Complaining that the fishing rod was too heavy is like complaining the weights at the gym are too heavy. You are fighting a large fish. Large fish require large effort. 53. You expected to see dolphins, sea turtles, whale sharks, manta rays, or other iconic marine wildlife during the charter. And when the ocean declined to stage a spontaneous wildlife exhibition around your specific vessel on your specific day, you attributed the absence to the captain's failure to take you to the right locations at the right time. Marine wildlife sightings on offshore fishing charters are probabilistic encounters with free-ranging wild animals moving through 140 million square miles of connected ocean. There is no schedule. There is no exhibit. The captain cannot call the whale sharks. Dolphin, sea turtle, and large pelagic wildlife sightings are documented as incidental encounters during fishing operations. They happen because the vessel is in relevant habitats during relevant conditions, not because the captain navigated to a predictable wildlife viewing location. No fishing charter markets itself as a guaranteed wildlife viewing operation because the wildlife is not reliably present in fixed locations on any predictable timeline. Dedicated marine wildlife watching charters, whale watching tours, dolphin cruises, manatee swim operations are a categorically distinct commercial product operating in different locations with different ecological knowledge bases. Booking a fishing charter and expecting a curated wildlife tour is a category error that exists at the booking stage, not at the captain's operational level. Large pelagic wildlife, whale sharks, oceanic manta rays, open ocean dolphin species are highly mobile, following bait fish schools, current systems, and seasonal migration patterns that shift continuously and cannot be forecast at the vessel day level. Ecotourism research consistently confirms that wildlife sighting frequency is highly variable, even on dedicated wildlife tours run by operators with decades of accumulated local knowledge. The incidental wildlife encounters that do occur on fishing charters are consistently cited in positive reviews as among the most memorable moments of the entire experience precisely because they are unexpected. Demanding guaranteed wildlife sightings on a fishing charter is like demanding guaranteed celebrity sightings on a city bus tour. You're in the right neighborhood. The animals have their own agenda. 54, you own fishing gear you prefer. You wanted to use it or were disappointed that it wasn't accommodated on demand mid-trip, and the captain's insistence on using the charter's matched tackle system felt controlling and dismissive of your personal investment in equipment that you selected and paid for yourself. Many charter captains do allow experienced anglers to use personal tackle. It is not a categorical prohibition across the industry. Where restrictions exist, they apply to situations where the captain's operational standard requires gear compatibility. He can verify and control before the fishing outcome depends on it. On shared charters where multiple lines run simultaneously in a coordinated spread, tackle compatibility across all rods. Matched drag settings, compatible line classes, consistent hook sizes is an operational requirement for tangle management and predictable fish fighting behavior. A single ultralight spinning rod introduced into a heavy conventional trolling spread creates immediate and real problems for every other angler on the vessel. The captain's tackle has been selected, tested, and maintained specifically for the fishery he runs. Leader material is tested against the specific structure and species profile. Hooks are sharpened or replaced on a maintenance schedule. He can confirm his gear is ready because he rigged and inspected it himself. He cannot make the same assessment about tackle he has never seen perform in his specific conditions. Terminal tackle incompatibility, mismatched hook sizes, incorrect leader strength, wrong sinker weight affects bait presentation in ways that reduce catch rate, not just for the individual using it, but for the vessel's aggregate outcome in drift and anchor scenarios. Professional fly fishing guides frequently require guests to use the guide's specific line systems, leaders, and fly patterns for exactly this reason. The guide system is optimized for the specific water being fished. Experienced anglers who request personal gear accommodation almost always receive it because experienced anglers demonstrate appropriateness quickly. The restriction applies to incompatible gear, not personal gear as a universal category. Being offended that the charter uses its own tackle is like being offended that the surgical team uses their instruments instead of yours. 55. The legally allowed daily catch limit for your target species was not reached during the trip, and you believe this shortfall between what was caught and what was legally allowed represents a contractual service failure for which a price reduction is the appropriate remedy because in your framework, the bag limit is apparently a performance floor rather than a legal ceiling. Bag limits are management tools set by NOAA fisheries and state agencies to control harvest pressure at the population level. They define the legal maximum you may retain. They do not define the minimum the captain is contracted to produce. Because no such minimum exists in any charter contract, any fishing regulation, or any legal framework governing recreational fishing in the United States. Charter contracts universally disclaim catch guarantees in plain language in the document you signed before boarding. The service you purchased was an opportunity to fish under professional guidance with proper equipment in productive water. That service was delivered. Bag limit attainment rates. The percentage of trips where anglers reach their full legal limit vary dramatically by species, season, and daily conditions. NOAA recreational fisheries data shows that limit attainment rates for many popular species average well below 50% across all participating anglers in any given management zone in any given season. The economic model of charter fishing does not include performance-based pricing because the performance variable is fish behavior, which is not under the captain's control and cannot be contracted against. If the logic of didn't reach the limit, deserve a discount were applied consistently, it would also require a surcharge on days where the limit was reached early since maximum value was delivered ahead of schedule. Nobody who catches a full limit before noon has ever offered to pay more. The logic only flows in one direction, which is how you know it's rationalization and not principle. Demanding a discount for not catching your limit is like demanding a refund from a hunting guide because the deer population didn't cooperate with your license. The license was for the opportunity. 56, the captain was intensely focused on finding and catching fish throughout the trip, monitoring sonar, adjusting position, communicating with other vessels, managing bait, and this professional concentration felt antisocial, joyless, or insufficiently entertaining, as though his job is to perform engagement for your comfort, rather than to catch fish for your cooler. A captain focused on fishing is doing exactly what you paid him to do, and his concentration is the mechanism that produces the results you came for. The most productive charter captains across every saltwater market, those with the highest documented catch records and the strongest long-term customer retention, are universally described in profiles and reviews as intensely focused on fishing. Productivity and social performance are different professional attributes, and in a fishing context, they are not equally valuable. Offshore fishing captains manage a continuous multi-variable decision process: sonar interpretation, current assessment, bird activity monitoring, weather development, vessel positioning, bait management, and real-time communication with other local captains in the area. This cognitive load is structurally incompatible with sustained social entertainment performance across an 8-hour offshore trip. The complaint about being too focused on fishing appears in reviews that consistently contrast the captain's professional intensity against a desired social atmosphere. More conversation, more casual storytelling, more interpersonal warmth. These things are available on different charter types: dinner cruises, sunset sails, dolphin tours. Fishing charters are optimized for fishing, and the optimization is what you paid for. Captains who prioritize customer entertainment over fishing execution produce genuinely pleasant experiences with lower catch rates and worse long-term review scores, because the majority of customers ultimately evaluate a fishing charter by whether it produced fish, not by whether the captain was fun to talk to. The most memorable 5-star reviews describe captains locked in and relentless. Complaining that your fishing captain was too focused on fishing is like complaining your surgeon was too focused on the surgery. The focus is why you hired him. 57, the boat encountered red tide during the trip, the fishing and overall experience were affected, and you believe the captain should have known in advance that this harmful algal bloom would be present in the specific water you fished and selected a different location before departure to avoid it entirely. Red tide is a naturally occurring harmful algal bloom whose spatial boundaries shift daily based on wind direction, current velocity, and bloom dynamics that no forecast system predicts at fine resolution 24 hours in advance. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission publishes daily red tide condition reports. Captains in affected regions actively monitor these reports and incorporate them into trip planning as a professional standard. Those reports provide approximate bloom boundaries based on recent sampling, not precise real-time boundary maps updated to the hour. Carenia brevis, the dinoflagellate responsible for Florida red tide events, forms blooms offshore and is transported inshore by wind and current in patterns that shift continuously. A location that is clear at 6 in the morning can be within a bloom boundary by 10, driven by a wind shift that developed overnight and wasn't resolved in the forecast. Red tide effects on fishing are not uniformly negative. Some species show behavioral responses that temporarily concentrate them near bloom edges in ways that experienced local captains recognize and use. NOAA's harmful algal bloom operational forecast system provides probability forecasts, but forecast skill for bloom movement at the spatial and temporal resolution relevant to a single charter trip is documented as limited by the researchers who operate it. The economic impact of red tide on Florida's charter fishing industry runs into hundreds of millions of dollars during major bloom events. Captains have every professional and financial incentive to avoid affected water. When they encounter it, despite that incentive, they didn't want to either. They were both surprised by the same ocean. Blaming a captain for hitting red tide is like blaming a pilot for encountering turbulence. The forecast helped. The atmosphere had its own plan. 58. You provided a gratuity at the start of the trip, either as an advance gesture or a pre-declared amount, and you feel this early payment entitled you to elevated, preferential, or customized service beyond what other passengers received, because in your understanding, a pre-trip tip is a service-level upgrade contract, rather than a gesture of goodwill with no attached operational implications. A pre-trip tip is a gesture. It is not a service contract, not an upgrade mechanism, and not a signal the fish can detect. Charter fishing service is delivered professionally and consistently to all passengers simultaneously because the captain and mate are managing a shared vessel with a shared outcome and cannot elevate one passenger's experience without degrading another's. Gratuity in the fishing charter industry is a post-service appreciation mechanism. The standard is 15 to 20% of the charter fee given at the end of the trip for good service actually rendered and observed. Pre-trip tipping falls outside the industry's established gratuity framework and creates expectations that the service structure cannot fulfill. The fishing outcome, where the boat goes, how long it stays, which technique is used, which position fishes which rod, is determined by fish behavior, conditions, and captain judgment. These determinants are not adjustable inputs in response to advanced gratuity because they are determined by the OSHAs, not by the captain's willingness to customize. The entitlement dynamic created by advanced tipping is documented in service industry psychology literature as counterproductive. It generates expectations of reciprocal special treatment that service professionals cannot fulfill without compromising their standard toward everyone else aboard. The most reliable path to excellent charter service costs nothing and is available to every passenger. Be prepared, cooperative, attentive, and easy to work with. These qualities consistently generate better captain attention, more instruction, more effort, and more fish than any financial signal given before lines are wet. Pre-tipping a captain and expecting upgraded service is like handing the referee money before the game and expecting favorable calls. 59. You wanted to sit on the gunnel or transom and dangle your feet over the side of a moving offshore vessel. The captain told you directly not to. This safety instruction felt unnecessarily restrictive and was delivered with a firmness you interpreted as personal rudeness, and you have filed this as a customer service failure on a boat operating in open ocean at speed. Hanging your feet over the side of a moving offshore vessel is a propeller strike and overboard scenario, and the instruction to stop is not a personality expression from the captain. It is him performing the most critical part of his professional function on a vessel where the consequences of a failure are irreversible and happen faster than any rescue response can reach you. Propeller strikes are among the most severe injury categories in recreational and commercial boating. A person who falls overboard from the stern or side of a moving vessel can be in contact with a rotating propeller within seconds of entering the water. The physics of vessel momentum and propeller position make this a near certainty at certain fall angles. USCG incident data consistently identifies propeller strikes as producing some of the most severe and least survivable injuries in the boating fatality database. A vessel underway in any sea state creates deck motion, pitch, roll, and yaw. that can displace a person seated on the gunnel without warning from a wake, a wave impact, or a sudden course correction at speed. Man overboard recovery in offshore conditions, even with perfect immediate response, takes several minutes minimum and is complicated by vessel maneuvering, current drift, and the physical difficulty of lifting a conscious person from the water onto a moving hull. The Coast Guard's passenger safety guidance specifically discourages riding on gunnels and transoms while underway, and this guidance is reflected in captain training materials across all licensing programs. Being upset that the captain stopped you from dangling your feet over a moving boat is like being upset a flight attendant made you put your tray table up for landing. The instruction exists because the physics of what happens next are very specific. 60. You have personal, ethical, or dietary commitments that extend to an objection to using animal products as fishing bait, and you expected the captain to accommodate this preference by switching to artificial lures for the standard cut bait operation mid-trip, without prior arrangement and without acknowledgement that this request restructures the fishing methodology for every other passenger aboard. Fishing bait is an operational tool selected for effectiveness in the specific fishery being worked. Cut bait is used because it demonstrably outperforms artificial lures for most bottom fishing and inshore applications across the species portfolios that standard charters target. This is a catch data conclusion built over decades of professional operation, not a tradition maintained for aesthetic reasons. Artificial lure fishing is valid and effective for specific species in specific scenarios. Pelagic trolling, surface lure, work for stripers and bluefish, precision jigging for certain deep water species. It is not a universal substitute that produces equivalent results across all charter fishing contexts. Your dietary ethics as they apply to your personal food consumption have no technical or biological relationship to fishing bait. The bait does not enter your body, and the fishing activity itself involves the same ethical territory regardless of what attractant is used to bring fish within range. The request to switch to lure-only fishing on a shared charter creates a direct operational conflict with every other passenger who paid for and expects the standard bait fishing experience the trip was advertised and booked as. The captain cannot individualize the fishing methodology by passenger on a shared vessel without compromising the aggregate outcome for everyone else. The most demanding artificial lure disciplines, technical jigging, precision fly fishing, require significant technique development that most first-time charter passengers don't arrive with, making the accommodation harder to execute, not simpler. Booking a fishing charter and requesting no animal bait be used is like ordering a dish and asking them to remove the ingredient that makes it the dish. The kitchen cannot redesign the menu mid-service for one table. 61. During the offshore charter, you discovered there was no Wi-Fi connection available on the vessel, and this absence of internet connectivity was noted in your trip assessment as a service deficiency that meaningfully reduced the quality of your experience on a fishing boat operating 20 to 60 miles from the nearest shoreline in the middle of the ocean. You were offshore, in the ocean, fishing. The absence of Wi-Fi is not a gap in the service offering, it is a direct consequence of the geographic location you paid to travel to, and for a significant portion of the people who fish offshore regularly, it is one of the primary reasons they go. Offshore charter fishing vessels operate well outside the range of standard terrestrial cellular and Wi-Fi infrastructure. Cellular coverage drops off between 5 and 20 miles offshore depending on carrier infrastructure and coastal topography, and most productive fishing grounds are well beyond that range. Satellite Wi-Fi systems are available for offshore vessel installation, but equipment costs run $5,000 to $10,000 per installation plus significant ongoing monthly service fees, costs that are not standard operating expenses for small charter operations and do not appear as listed amenities in standard charter contracts. The disconnection from cellular and internet service during an offshore fishing trip is widely cited by experienced anglers as one of the primary experiential benefits of the outing. The enforced separation from digital communication is considered a feature of going somewhere genuinely remote, not a deficiency of the vessel. Emergency communication on charter vessels is handled via VHF Marine Radio, a robust, maritime-specific system with dedicated emergency frequencies monitored continuously by the Coast Guard. The absence of Wi-Fi creates no safety communication gap. The Wi-Fi complaint is exclusively a comfort complaint with no safety, operational, or service delivery component attached to it. Complaining that an offshore fishing charter doesn't have Wi-Fi is like complaining a mountain summit doesn't have an elevator. The absence of infrastructure is definitionally part of going somewhere remote. 62. The captain navigated to fishing locations using GPS waypoints he declined to share with you, and you interpreted this professional confidentiality about the specific coordinates of productive reefs, wrecks, and structure as dishonesty, arrogance, or a failure of transparency, rather than recognizing it as the most valuable professional asset he owns. A charter captain's GPS waypoints are his professional intellectual property built through years of exploratory fishing, significant personal fuel expenditure, and the accumulated pattern recognition of thousands of trips on a specific body of water. You paid for access to those locations for the duration of your trip. You did not purchase the coordinates themselves, any more than a restaurant dinner includes the recipe for the meal. The charter price covers what the knowledge produces, the fishing experience at those locations, not the transfer of the knowledge itself for independent future use. Fishing location confidentiality is a universal professional norm across the guiding and charter industry. Top-performing captains protect their best waypoints as competitively sensitive information because those coordinates represent a direct and measurable booking advantage over competitors who haven't found the same fish holding structure. Tournament fishing culture includes specific ethical norms around location secrecy that are codified into competition rules at the highest levels of the sport. Revealing productive tournament locations to competitors is considered an ethical violation, not a minor social awkwardness. The economic impact of GPS waypoint exposure is documented in charter industry forums as a real competitive threat. Locations shared with customers and subsequently published online or sold to competing operations have caused captains to lose their primary income, generating knowledge advantage. Specific reef and wreck coordinates are discovered through private exploration effort and are not public information simply because the government has charted the general bottom topography. Being upset that the captain won't share his GPS waypoints is like being upset a chef won't email his recipes after you ate at his restaurant. You paid for the meal. The recipe is still his. 63. You brought a child on the charter and expected the captain to prioritize your child's rod time above all other operational considerations, including the paid experience of other passengers, the efficiency of fish handling, and the physics of when strikes actually occur. And when this prioritization wasn't delivered unconditionally, you felt the captain failed your family. Captains on family-friendly charters go out of their way to include children in the fishing experience. And this is documented consistently in captain interviews as one of the most genuinely rewarding parts of the job. The operational constraint has nothing to do with attitude and everything to do with timing. Fish strikes occur on the fish's schedule. A child not holding a rod when a fish hits cannot take over the fight without a rod transfer that takes several seconds. Seconds during which the fish continues running against an untended drag, increasing the probability of a break-off or a thrown hook. The child gets the rod after the fish is gone. This is a physics problem, not a preference. Shared charters with multiple paying adult passengers cannot be operationally restructured to deliver one family's child priority fishing experience at the expense of other customers who paid the same rate for the same trip. All passengers purchased equal access to the same professional service. Private family charters, where the entire vessel is booked by one party, are specifically designed for the child-centered experience the parent is describing because there are no competing passenger priorities and the captain can structure the entire trip around the children's engagement and enjoyment. The appropriate charter format for a child-first fishing experience is a private booking, and the price difference between shared and private reflects exactly this capability. Children who do fight and land their own fish on charters, even small ones handled at the right moment, generate the most emotionally authentic positive reviews in the industry. Captains know this. The desire to create that moment is genuine. The problem is the physics, not the captain. 64. The fish storage compartment on the vessel showed evidence of prior use, carried a residual biological odor, and did not meet your cleanliness standards. And you filed this as a service deficiency on a commercial fishing charter that goes out every single day and returns every single day with fish that are stored in that exact compartment. A fish box is a container for dead fish kept in ice. It smells like fish because fish are stored in it. This is not a cleaning failure. This is a fish box completing its designated function at the precise moment you encountered it. Fish boxes on charter vessels are pressure washed, scrubbed with marine-grade cleaning solution, and iced down before every trip as standard operating procedure on professionally run operations. The residual odor that persists after thorough cleaning is not removable through any additional cleaning effort. It is absorbed into the insulation material over years of use and represents biologically inert organic compounds that pose no health risk and do not transfer to properly iced fish stored in the compartment. The cleaning standard applied to charter fish boxes is functionally identical to the standard used by commercial fishing operations that supply fish directly to wholesale seafood markets and restaurant distributors. It is the professional baseline for the industry. Food safety and fish storage is managed through adequate ice quantity and temperature maintenance, not through sterility standards, analogous to surgical environments or food service kitchens. Consumer-grade coolers owned by recreational anglers accumulate identical odor profiles after repeated use for fish storage and require the same maintenance cycle. The charter fish box and the customer's personal cooler at home are maintained identically and smell identically after equivalent use. The complaint exclusively appears in reviews that also reference boat smell, bait smell, and general marine odor, indicating a broader sensory incompatibility with offshore fishing environments rather than a specific cleaning deficiency. Complaining that the fish box smells like fish is the complaint that closes the collection. 65. You expected the charter to offer eco-certified, carbon-neutral, or environmentally upgraded service options, greener fuel alternatives, biodegradable tackle, carbon offset programs, and the absence of these options reflected, in your assessment, a failure of environmental responsibility on the part of an operation that takes people fishing for a living in one of the most ecologically sensitive environments on Earth. Commercial charter fishing is a working maritime industry with a direct and permanent financial stake in the health of the ecosystem it operates in. The captain's livelihood depends entirely on the marine environment remaining productive, which aligns his long-term professional interests with conservation outcomes more durably than any certification program. Recreational fishing has a measurably lower environmental footprint per participant than most alternative tourism activities, significantly lower than an intercontinental flight to a diving destination, a week at a safari lodge, or the cumulative driving of personal vehicles to repeated individual fishing locations. The fishing charter industry has adopted substantial conservation measures over the past 30 years. Mandatory non-offset circle hooks in federal waters, prohibited species protections, federal size and bag limits, and voluntary catch and release practices that are now standard at reputable operations across every major saltwater market. Lead sinker alternatives, steel, bismuth, and tungsten, are commercially available and used by many operations, particularly where lead contamination regulations are active. Biodegradable fishing line exists as a developing technology but carries performance trade-offs in heavy saltwater use that limit current adoption in commercial contexts. Switching offshore charter propulsion to electric or hybrid systems at the power levels and operating ranges required for deep water fishing is not commercially viable with current technology. This is an engineering constraint, not a philosophical position. Asking a fishing charter captain why he isn't more eco-friendly while he runs a sustainable fishery operation that his entire income depends on remaining healthy is like asking a farmer at a local market why he doesn't have better packaging. He grew the food. That was the hard part. 66 other passengers on the shared charter were loud, enthusiastic about their catches, occupied deck space you wanted, or were in other ways socially incompatible with your preferred experience. And you hold the captain responsible for the interpersonal dynamics of strangers who independently booked the same commercial trip you independently booked with no coordination between any of you. A charter captain is a maritime professional. He is not a social moderator, a personality compatibility screener, a conflict mediator, or a noise level manager for adult strangers making legal choices on a public-facing commercial vessel that anyone with a credit card can book. Shared charter fishing operations book individual passengers independently, creating a group of unrelated people with no shared social contract beyond the fishing trip itself. Social compatibility between those passengers is not a bookable service parameter on any charter platform anywhere. The captain's authority on a vessel extends to safety compliance, fishing order management, and regulatory adherence. Interpersonal behavior between passengers that doesn't create safety hazards or violate vessel rules is outside his operational mandate. He has a boat to run, sonar to watch, and fish to find. Private charter bookings, which purchase the entire vessel for one party, are the commercially available solution to the other people were there problem. The price premium exists to reflect exactly this preference. The shared rate was specifically and transparently for the shared experience. The behavior most commonly cited in other passengers were annoying. Reviews includes talking at normal volume, celebrating caught fish enthusiastically, fishing the same productive positions, and catching more fish than the reviewer. These are not behavioral violations. They are fishing. Captain forums. Document cases where captains who attempted to mediate passenger interpersonal disputes were cited negatively in reviews by both parties simultaneously. Expecting a fishing captain to manage the social chemistry of strangers on a shared boat is like expecting a taxi driver to curate your emotional relationship with the other passenger. He's driving. The dynamics are yours. 67 after a full day of offshore fishing, 8 to 12 hours on the water in physically demanding sun and conditions. The captain's demeanor during docking and the post-trip wrap-up was businesslike and efficient rather than effusively warm and socially engaged. And this closing energy has been documented as a service failure that diminishes the overall rating of the experience. A charter captain at the end of a full offshore trip has been operating at sustained cognitive and physical capacity for 8 to 12 consecutive hours, managing navigation, fish location, passenger safety, tackle, weather, and radio communication simultaneously. The fact that the boat is back at the dock, every person aboard is safe, and the fish are in the box is the warmth. That was what the care looked like for the entire day. The physical and cognitive demands of a full offshore charter are documented as equivalent in intensity to high-demand professional occupations where post-shift fatigue is a recognized occupational reality. The post-trip procedure at the dock, tying up, unloading equipment, logging the trip, fuel accounting, beginning fish cleaning, and beginning preparation for the next day's departure, is a compressed operational window that requires continued focus, not a social performance wind-down. Customer experience research identifies the departure moment as having disproportionate influence on overall memory of an experience, a phenomenon that hospitality and theme park operators address with dedicated closing experience staff. A two-person charter crew does not have dedicated closing experience staff. The same captain described as insufficiently warm at the dock is almost always described in the same review as knowledgeable, effective, and skilled during the fishing portions of the trip. Confirming the late-day demeanor is a fatigue expression, not a service quality indicator. Marking a captain down for not being effusively warm while tying up after a 10-hour offshore trip is like rating a surgeon lower because he wasn't smiling during the post-operative debrief. He ran a 10-hour procedure. You made it back. The warmth was in the work. 68, there were intervals during the trip when other passengers were fishing and you were not actively holding a rod, and you experienced these periods as boring or unfulfilling, and the captain should have anticipated and prevented the existence of any moment during an offshore fishing trip when you are not in continuous active engagement with a fish. Fishing has always involved waiting. For 40,000 years across every culture on Earth that has practiced it, fishing has involved extended periods of observation, patience, and anticipation between moments of active engagement. This is the activity. The waiting is not a defect in the delivery, it is structurally inseparable from the catching, and it always has been. The ratio of waiting time to active fish fighting time is one of the most consistently documented and least contested realities of sport fishing. Even on highly productive days, the total duration of active hookup and fighting represents a fraction of the total trip time. The rest is searching, presenting bait, positioning the vessel, and waiting for wild animals to make a decision. Watching another angler fight a fish is a standard participatory element of shared charter fishing. It generates shared excitement, social engagement, and the immediate anticipation of your own turn, which is the emotional mechanism that makes the catch feel rewarding when it arrives. The intervals between action are when fish finding decisions are made, gear is adjusted and improved, bait is freshened, and the captain repositions based on new information. These intervals are operationally productive even when they are experientially quiet. The concept of fishing as a patient, contemplative practice distinct from continuous action recreation is embedded in the cultural history of the sport going back centuries. Customers who describe themselves as bored watching others fish consistently also describe very successful trips for the other passengers, confirming the fishing and the captain performed. The expectation was the mismatch. Being bored watching others fish and blaming the captain is like going to a baseball game and complaining you spent most of the time watching other people bat. You're at fishing. Fishing has innings. 69. Certain positions on the vessel produce more fish or offered better casting angles, and you believe that the size of your booking, your arrival time, or some other seniority principle should have entitled you to claim one of those positions for the full duration of the shared trip, regardless of rotation or other passengers. Equal access to the same space. Position management on shared charters is handled by the captain and mate to provide all passengers equitable access to productive angles and rod opportunities throughout the trip, because the alternative, a system where dominant passengers monopolize prime positions, produces the worst aggregate experience and the most damaging reviews across every other passenger type on the vessel. The productive fishing positions on a charter deck change continuously as the vessel moves, current shifts, and the fish school relocates. The best spot is not a fixed geographic location on the deck that can be claimed before departure and held for 8 hours. It is a dynamic relationship between the boat's current position and the fish's current position, and it changes every time the captain adjusts. Trolling operations produce most strikes on specific lines based on position in the spread. Outrigger lines, flat lines, short riggers. And the captain assigns which passenger fishes which position based on readiness and current technique requirements, not booking volume or arrival sequence. Private charters give the booking party complete flexibility to manage position and rod preference among their own group, including giving one person every opportunity for the entire day if that's what the group wants. Shared charters have multiple parties who all paid equal rates for equal access. The position that produced the most fish yesterday is not the position that produces the most fish today. Current direction, boat orientation, and fish behavior all affect which deck position is most productive at any given moment. Claiming the best fishing spot by right of payment is like claiming the best seat in an orchestra because you bought the most expensive ticket. The fish hit where the fish hit. 70. The mandatory pre-departure safety briefing, covering life jacket locations, emergency procedures, fire extinguisher placement, and overboard protocol. Felt like wasted time that delayed the start of fishing, and the captain was being unnecessarily cautious about a formality that wasn't relevant to your specific trip on your specific day. The pre-departure safety briefing on a charter vessel is a requirement under 46 CFR Part 185, federal regulations governing small passenger vessels, mandating that operators conduct safety briefings for all passengers before departure, covering personal flotation device locations, emergency procedures. fire suppression equipment, and means of escape. This is not the captain's personal preference for thoroughness. It is federal maritime law, and skipping it would place his license in jeopardy regardless of how calm the conditions look at the dock. USCG recreational boating statistics consistently identify drowning as the leading cause of death in boating fatalities, and the majority of drowning victims were not wearing personal flotation devices at the time of the incident. Pre-departure briefings that identify where flotation devices are located and how to use them address the primary mortality factor in boating incidents by the most direct available method. The duration of a standard charter safety briefing is 3 to 5 minutes. The fishing trip is 4 to 12 hours. The ratio of briefing time to fishing time is approximately 1 to 60 at minimum. The wasted time is statistically negligible against the operational duration it protects. The safety briefing establishes where emergency equipment is located, information that is only useful if passengers retain it before they need it, because an emergency is not the appropriate time for a first briefing on equipment that may determine the outcome. Man overboard scenarios on charter vessels require immediate coordinated response from the entire crew, including passengers who understood the briefing. A briefed passenger in that scenario is a functional crew member. An unbriefed one is a bystander. Complaining that the safety briefing wasted fishing time is like complaining the airplane safety demonstration delayed your departure. That demonstration is what you fall back on when everything else stops working. 71. The trip didn't meet your expectations, for whatever combination of reasons documented across the previous 70 complaints, and you have concluded that charter fishing is a fundamentally flawed and pointless pursuit, that the captain failed you, that the ocean failed you, and that none of it is worth repeating because the experience you had did not match the experience you constructed in your imagination before you arrived at the dock. The charter didn't fail you. You arrived with a set of expectations that the ocean, the biology, and the physics of saltwater fishing were structurally incapable of fulfilling, and the gap between what you imagined and what the water delivered was yours to close before you boarded, not the captain's to prevent after you did. The American Sport Fishing Association reports that over 50 million Americans fish annually, generating $115 billion in economic activity, making it one of the largest participatory sports in the country. The activity is not structurally broken. The alignment between your expectations and the activity's actual nature was the problem, and that problem existed before the boat left the dock. Charter fishing repeat booking rates are among the highest in adventure tourism. Experienced fishing customers return because they understand what the activity is and value the experience proportionate to its genuine nature, not to a fantasy version of it. The customers who describe a charter as pointless after one trip almost universally describe experiences that experienced anglers would recognize as normal fishing days. Real conditions, real fish, real outcomes, real effort, real ocean. Fishing is the only recreational activity where the primary outcome variable is controlled by a wild animal making independent decisions in a three-dimensional environment that humans cannot enter, predict, or fully manipulate. That is the feature, not the flaw. That is why a catch means something. Every experienced angler has a collection of slow days, rough seas, lost fish, and empty boxes that are inseparable from the days that made them come back. The bad days are the cost of admission. There is no version of fishing that removes them. Come back when you're ready to actually fish. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.